we'll get started. So I will officially call the Wednesday, April 21st, 2021 meeting of the City of Falls Church Planning Commission to order. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Brent Krasner, and with Andy Rankin's departure, I said this last time, but I'll say it the next couple times, especially when we have guests. With Andy Rankin's departure from the commission, I'm the newly elected chairperson. Tim Stevens is our newly elected vice chair. And welcome to those of you who are from various boards and commissions. Some of you I know were here at our previous meeting on another topic. For those of you who weren't, welcome. And with that, before we get started, I will read the boilerplate because we are holding this meeting electronically. So the meeting for which this agenda has been posted will be held pursuant to and in compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3708.2, and state and local legislation adopted to allow for continued government operation during the COVID-19 declared emergency. All participating members of the Planning Commission will be present at this meeting through electronic means, and all members of the public are welcome to view the meeting on the web at www.fallschurchva.gov/PC. You can also view the meeting on Falls Church City Public Television, which you can find if you have Cox Channel 11, RCN Channel 2, and Verizon Fios Channel 35. Public comments will be accepted virtually. Those who sign up to speak, will speak via the meeting video platform. So this is new. To speak on a public hearing item, for those items that we have that are actually public hearings. Some of the items today are work sessions, but for public hearing items, to speak or provide general public comment, you'll need to complete a speaker form, which you can find online at www.fallschurchva.gov/public comment. Or this would have been in advance, before noon on the day of the meeting. Following submission of the form, you'll receive emailed instructions to join the virtual Planning Commission meeting. Written public comments sent in advance of the meeting will be accepted until at the email address plan@fallschurchva.gov until noon on the day of the meeting, and will be sent to the commission and summarized at the meeting. So with that, we'll start with a roll call.
All right, Mr. Krasner?
I am here.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Ms. Teets?
Here.
Mr. Puentes?
Here.
Ms. Weiss?
Here.
Ms. Coleman?
Here.
Thanks.
Okay, great. So we're all present and accounted for, and we'll move right into the adoption of the agenda. It's a long agenda, and I know Mr. Stoddard and I did chat about it. He's broken it up. Staff has proposed breaking it up to have the work session kind of split. We have a work session item in the beginning, and then we have work session items at the end. We also have some action items sprinkled in, but I think the point of it was because we have significant attendance for the One City Center work session, to do that first, and then move into some of our other items that may have less attendance from those outside the commission and less public perhaps participation. So with that, if the commission is okay with the way it's been laid out, like I said, Paul and I talked about that, and then I'm fine with the way he's laid it out. So with that, unless there's any discussion on that item, I propose that we adopt the agenda as it's printed.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the agenda.
I second.
Great. I got a motion and a second by Ms. Teets. A roll call vote, please.
All right, Mr. Krasner?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens? Mr. Stevens?
Oh, you muted, Mr. Stevens?
No, he's not muted. Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Puentes?
Yes.
Ms. Weiss?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, great. And again, this goes without saying. I think we've all been in so many online meetings over recent times, but those of you who are here who aren't speaking, just mute the microphones. I'm getting a little bit of shuffling of papers or feedback from somebody. I don't know who, but just try to keep track of that. I know sometimes we all forget to mute or unmute, but we'll do our best. Okay, so with that, we've adopted the agenda as it's printed, which means that our first, I'm sorry, before I jump ahead, we have no speaker series. Are there any petitions that we've received, Ms. Bazemore, for items not on the agenda?
No.
Okay, didn't think so, but we always have it on there. We got to check. Okay, so now we'll move ahead to item 6A, which will be our work session on the One City Center special exception application. Again, this is a preliminary board and commission workshop. It's not a public hearing. It's not a town hall. It's an opportunity at a very conceptual early stage. The process, the application has not made it out of city council, but this is a new format that staff and the commission are sort of piloting on some of the projects this year to try to get some board and commission feedback early in the process while it's still moldable and pliable and at a more conceptual level. And so with that, I guess we'll jump into that. I do see someone has their hand raised. I mean, we should certainly, when we're ready for comment from various people, we should definitely utilize the raising of hands. And I apologize if I didn't see that. I see somebody has their, oh, now it's down. Good. Okay, so people, if you see the hand raise tool, we'll use that to speak. It'll help, obviously, with the large number of folks we have here. I think we're going to go through letting staff make a brief presentation. We'll then hear from the applicants, and then we'll go into comments from the boards and commission members, and we'll start with the boards and commission members who are attending, and then we'll allow the planning commissioners to maybe speak after that and have their questions at the end, just to try to keep things orderly. So with that, I guess I will throw it over to staff. I guess Mr. Stoddard first, introduce the item, and then I know we'll get a staff presentation.
All right, thank you, Chair Krasner. If I could just to touch on some of those points that Brent already mentioned, that the process we're going through here is a pilot effort. We happen to have 2 applications in right now for special exceptions, so we're piloting this new process with both applications. Of course, at the last Planning Commission meeting, there was a workshop on the Founders Road 2 application. And Ms. Bazemore, if you could jump back to the agenda real quick. We got some feedback from the council this Monday about some concerns about making sure we were messaging appropriately where this application was in the process. So we added this disclaimer to the agenda earlier today, just to highlight the fact that this is, as the chair said, a preliminary workshop. This project hasn't received a formal action from council, and so the idea is to solicit preliminary feedback, early feedback from the boards and commissions. I think the benefit is to get the boards and commissions involved sooner, so that their feedback can be heard and incorporated when the project is in its early phases. And hopefully that's a benefit for the applicant as well, to hear from a wider sort of band of the community what would be sort of interesting to the various participants that take a look at this. This is a special exception application, and I'm actually going to turn it over for the details of the application and the project summary and the staff analysis to date to the lead case planner on this, Ms. Akita Ruzzi. Akita?
Yep, good evening. Before I turn it over to the applicant's team for their presentation, I'd like to provide a brief summary of the staff report. The application before you is for a new mixed-use development proposal at the intersection of West Broad Street and South Maple Avenue. The overall proposed development site entails 5 parcels, including 150 South Washington Street, 101, 191, and 201 West Broad Street. and a small vacant parcel at the corner of South Maple Avenue and West Broad Street. Excuse me, I'm just gonna get rid of my kids real quick. Sorry. Go, Daddy, please. Thank you. Shut the door. Shut the door.
All right.
Thank you. Sorry, this happens only during meetings. So the proposed project includes a new mixed-use building, as well as improvements to existing buildings at George Mason Square and the office building at 150 South Washington. As proposed, the new mixed-use building includes ground floor retail on Broad, Washington, Maple, Annandale, and along an interior street through the project. Grocery use on ground floor at the corner of Maple and Broad, which is approximately 26,000 square feet. Mezzanine level retail commercial space along an interior street and Broad Street. Upper level office use of approximately 43,000 square feet. 6 levels of residential use with 246 units above ground floor retail and office. And finally, a structured parking garage with 969 parking spaces in total. Proposed upgrades to existing buildings as part of this project include first level facade improvements to George Mason Square buildings and upgrades to courtyard, and site and possible facade improvements to existing office building at 150 South Washington. The development applications include special exceptions to allow residential use within the mixed-use development and to increase in building height from a maximum of 75 feet to a maximum of 115 feet. Additionally, the applicant will be requesting a waiver to the property deed covenants. The 2 properties at the intersection of Maple and Broad, which includes the Taylor parcel and a small vacant parcel at the corner there, were conveyed by the city to Atlantic Realty in 2013. And the deed for those properties include covenants restricting residential use on the property. Since the deed also includes a provision that authorizes the city to waive all or any portion of these covenants, the City Council has the authority to grant such waiver as part of the SC approval. A written request will be provided as part of the second submission materials for the city's consideration as the project moves forward. In terms of application status, this is their first submission and staff has reviewed the materials and provided comments, which is provided in the report attachment. The applicant intends to submit the revised submission around mid-May. And as part of that submission, they will respond to staff comments and feedback from council, as well as comments received this evening from members of the Planning Commission and other boards and commissions as part of our new process, as Mr. Stoddard just mentioned, and a pre-referral workshop is what we're calling this tonight. The City Council held a work session on April 5th and provided feedback on the first iteration of the proposal. Those comments are summarized on page 4 of the staff report and includes items related to pedestrian access, traffic impact, architecture, and open space, among other project elements. Pending submission of the voluntary concessions in support of the application and other information on stormwater management, for now, staff has provided a preliminary review of the project in the report and the staff comments letter. Once those additional materials are available, staff's analysis will be updated to reflect any substantial changes in the project and the proposed community benefits. The applicant plans to provide their first draft, as mentioned, as part of their second submission in mid-May. Right now, most of the proposed community benefits are discussed in their narrative statement and their SC view book. And staff's evaluation of those based on the SC code is provided on page 8 of the staff report, I think. For tonight, I'll just provide some key highlights from that analysis. For comprehensive plan consistency, this area is already planned mixed use on the comp plan land use map, so the proposed development is consistent with that vision. The comp plan also calls for a balanced mix of uses that reinforces and maximizes pedestrian connectivity and results in a significant market-driven commercial activity center that's supported by residential uses necessary to ensure commercial success here. And small area plan consistency, the downtown small area plan recognizes the project site as an area for dense redevelopment potential. The site's within the core commercial area, which is an area envisioned for greater concentrations of commercial activity that supports density and taller building heights. And like the comp plan, the small area plan also talks about investment in pedestrian infrastructure, walkability, and active and vibrant streets. With the ground floor commercial uses proposed in the project and the pedestrian improvements around the site, the project begins to demonstrate consistency with some of these goals for the area. Of course, the investment in the existing commercial spaces like the George Mason Square building and the 150 South Washington building is another positive aspect of the project. The SC code was updated recently, and staff's evaluation of the report is based on the new code. How the development response to each criterion is discussed in the report, and I would have to see some of the project commitments and community benefits and more certainty in the form of VCs in the future. But based on the commitments outlined in their narrative statement and their proposed plans, again, the project begins to address some of those objectives within the SC code. In terms of fiscal impact, a detailed report from Becky Witzman is provided at the end of the staff comments letter. In summary, the expected fiscal impact is $744,000 annually. These fiscal projections may change based on the developer's commitments to commercial and grocer square footage proposed in the project. I'll wrap up with schedule. So a detailed tentative schedule is provided at the end of the report. That schedule is obviously subject to change with input from council as the project moves forward. For now, council public hearing for referral to boards and commissions is anticipated in June 2021, with final consideration and public hearing in November. This means the formal boards and commissions review would occur in the month of July and early August. That's all I have for this evening. I'm happy to take questions, and otherwise I'll defer to the applicant for his presentation. Mr. Andrew Painter, I think, is going to start off.
Thank you, Ms. Ruzzi. Mr. Chairman, if with your permission, I can proceed. Okay.
Sure, go right ahead, Mr. Painter.
Thank you very much. So good evening. My name is Andrew Painter. I'm a zoning attorney at the law firm of Walsh Colucci. And like Ms. Ruzzi, I'll probably have a herd of children streaming by here in just a few minutes. It'll sound like elephants to everybody, but this application was filed in late January. As Ms. Ruzzi mentioned, we received our first round of comments just a few weeks ago. We've been evaluating those comments. We've been meeting with staff, clarifying them, and we are looking to resubmit, as Ms. Ruzzi said, in early May. Before we filed, we appeared before the City Council's Economic Development Committee at its December and February meetings, and then we also appeared before City Council for a preliminary work session just a couple of weeks ago. And at the close of the presentation, I can walk through some of those comments that we received if there's time and if there's a desire. What we have to present to you this evening really is a work in progress. We've received a ton of feedback, a lot of technical comments, some policy comments, but we're looking to incorporate constructive feedback wherever possible. And what I thought I would do with your permission is to sort of, provide an overview of the presentation. Then I'd like to turn it over to our architect, Thomas Danini, to walk you through the floor plans and some of the architectural features of the project. And then if there's time and I can walk through a couple of the comments that were received, I can do that. And then I'd like to conclude by turning it over to our civil engineer, Peter Crawford with Urban Engineering, to walk through our stormwater management approach. If we can go to the next slide, Ms. Bazemore. Just to show you who is on the team, this property is owned by Atlantic Realty Companies. Of course, they've been a longtime corporate citizen in the Falls Church. They've invested heavily in Falls Church, built Pearson Square, and have owned George Mason Square for a number of years. and have acquired the surrounding properties, including 150 South Washington Street, the BB&T Bank building, and the Matt's Tailoring building, which we'll show in just a second. Our civil engineer, as I mentioned, is Urban Engineering. Our architect is Davis Carter Scott. This is the same group that constructed or that designed the 301 West Broad Street project where the Harris Teeter is. Our landscape architect, it's split. We have Fine Landscapes doing some of it. We also have Urban Engineering, the landscape architects at Urban doing some of it. Our transportation engineer is Garove Slade. They've done a number of projects in the city. And then our office and retail leasing is really being driven by KLNB. And we thought it was very important to involve our retail brokers as a part of our team from the very beginning, because we want to make sure that we have really a successful retail and office program here. If we can go to the next slide, please. Wanted to just recognize Adam Schulman with Atlantic Realty just for a few minutes or for a minute or two, just to say a friendly hello. As I mentioned, Atlantic Realty has been a longtime corporate citizen and have been proud investors in the city too. So Adam, I don't know if you're on the line, but
Sure.
Wanted to recognize you.
Andrew, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Chair. Good evening, other members of the Planning Commission and everybody else who's in attendance tonight. As Andrew has really given a very high level view of what we're doing here, I just wanted to take a moment, and for those of you who don't know who I am or who we are, is give you a little bit of a flavor and or reminder. We have been a developer, property manager, owner in the Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, suburban Maryland markets since the early 90s, and specifically involved in Falls Church since the late 90s when we acquired George Mason Square. And since that time, as Andrew just said, we've acquired a number of other assets on this particular city block. During that time frame, also, we rezoned the Duckpin Bowling Alley site and built Pearson Square and built 400 Maple, where Tax Analyst Building sits. And that project happened with the absolute work of the city. And I think both Pearson Square and the office building next to it were very successful projects in kicking off what later became a lot more development within the city of Falls Church. And we've been working on a redevelopment plan for the surrounding block of George Mason Square and even further involvement in the city for quite some time. This is not something that we've just come into and just woken up and said, hey, this is a plan that we should work on. This is something, and a lot of thought has gone into this plan over many, many years. And we've looked at just about every angle and every format that you could possibly imagine. And we think that we finally come up with a good format that it will stand the test of time, that meets the city's objectives and the city's goals, is in accordance with the comprehensive plan, and provides additional commercial, provides additional retail, additional residential, and also complements the other assets that are in this city block. And most significantly, it provides additional parking, improvement to the parking garage that supports those office buildings and also supports some of the various city uses that we have going on today. So we truly believe this is a total package. We believe that this is something that is good for us to work with in the city. We're trying to find and follow what we believe the city has been looking for, and we're really trying to respond to those things. And we think that we've come up with a good plan. The team that we have in place now, with Andrew and with Thomas and with Urban, Grove Slade, Fine Landscapes, these are all groups that we have worked together with for many years. And it's a good team approach that has taken quite a bit of thought to come up with our current package. And it's something that we intend to build and develop and stay here for the long haul. We are not a developer who comes in and builds and flips, as is indicative of the fact of how long we've held the assets in Falls Church. It's something that, we believe that we can develop this and continue to manage for a good period of time. That's really what our objective is, and that's what our objective has been in the millions of square feet that we've developed in the DMV area over the many years. So with that said, I can go on, but I do know, as it's been pointed out, that we have a long agenda, and I'm going to turn it over to what you probably really want to hear from is a little bit more from Andrew and then from Thomas, who's the mastermind behind all the architecture that you're going to see here. So again, I thank you very much, and afterwards I'll certainly be here for questions and comments. and always happy to hear any that happen to be made. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. Ms. Bazemore, if we can go to the next slide, please. So I think we all know where the site is located. This is something that we've all walked by. You know, we've dined at 4Ps, we've walked strollers by, we've jogged by. It's really 5 separate parcels of record, as Ms. Ruzzi said, comprising about 4.62 acres. On the site today, there's about 130,000 square feet of existing commercial uses. This includes the existing parking garage that is attached to George Mason Square, the 3 office building complex, which is shown in number 4. And it also includes 150 South Washington Street, which is the office building that's just on the south side of the office building. And what's interesting, and that's shown in parcel number 5 there. What's interesting about that is it's split. It's bisected by Annandale Road, which was pushed through when the city extended Annandale back in the late 1960s. So it separated that parcel out. And in the southeastern quadrant of that intersection, directly opposite the bowling alley, is a triangular parking lot. Sometimes it's used for overflow parking, but it is paved from stem to stern, and it's just sort of sitting there. Up at the corner of Maple Avenue and West Broad Street, directly across from the CVS parking lot, there's the very small parcel number 1, what we call the corner parcel, and number 2, which is the Matt's Tailoring parcel. Those are the 2 properties that were conveyed to the city or from the city to Atlantic Realty, and they're the ones that have the residential deed restriction on them. And it basically says that, thou shalt not do any residential on those 2 parcels without the blessing of the city in writing. And then last but not least is the BB&T, the former B&B&T building and its associated parking lot as well. All of these properties are zoned to the B2 General Business District. And again, the total amount of commercial square footage is about 130,222 square feet. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Ms. Ruzzi touched on the comprehensive planning recommendations for this site. We really view this as a positive step in the implementation of the city's comprehensive planning policies, which, at least in terms of this site, go back, more than 15 years. The future land use map, which is shown on the left, designates this property for mixed use, which encourages innovative residential, retail, and commercial office uses. The 2005 comprehensive plan incorporates what is known as the city center concept plan, along with a new mid-block pedestrian crossing along West Broad Street and a traffic circle at the intersection of South Maple Avenue and Annandale Road, catty corner to the redeveloped bowling alley. And that concept plan, which is shown in the upper right-hand corner, was incorporated into the 2005 comprehensive plan. And then shown in the lower right-hand corner is an excerpt from the 2014 Downtown Small Area Plan. And the Downtown Small Area Plan includes this property within what is known as the core commercial area of Downtown Falls Church, and it is intended to evolve into the densest, most walkable and bicycle-friendly district in the city for downtown. So if we can go to the next slide. These are the specific council requests, just to sort of distill it all down. There's 3 specific council requests. One would be a special exception for mixed-use development. One would be the special exception for an increase in building height from 75 feet to 115 feet. And last but not least is an amendment to the special warranty deed that I just discussed. And we will be working with city staff and the city attorney on that in conjunction with our resubmission. In addition to these specific city council requests, there would be at least 2 planning commission requests. One would be a site plan for the new construction, the new mixed-use building and the new things that we're proposing on the site. And then one would be a site plan amendment to show the changes that we're proposing to the existing George Mason Square office complex. So we will be, hopefully back before you for both of those at a later time before the commission after or concurrent with this process. If we can go to the next slide, please. Want to take a step back and just talk about how we approached the design that we'll be showing you this evening. This is a site that is extremely prominent in the city. So we have tried to view the site holistically and as a key component to Downtown Falls Church. When you come from I-66 and you're heading south towards the Dunkin' Donuts and you're sitting at the light, that site is there. It's visible as soon as you pass the State Theater, right? And you look towards towards off to the right. This is an area that has long been planned to evolve into a vibrant commercial hub, residential hub, mixed use hub. It's a site that has waited for a long time for the right mix of land uses to help realize the downtown small area plan. And we've also been thinking about repositioning George Mason Square to make that asset work better. And so that's sort of, the first design driver is to sort of view this site holistically. The second is equally important, and that's really to celebrate the site's visibility and have a strong outward face on all street frontages. This comprises an entire city block in downtown Falls Church. The site is surrounded by streets on all sides, and that means that it has a lot of visibility, it has a lot of opportunity, but it also has a lot of design responsibility. And so we have sought to treat it as such. That means each facade, each public street frontage. And we also wanted to create or capture a concept that we had heard during our discussions that the city, should appear as though it's built up over time. It's not just one massive building with all the same architecture. It looks like it has been organically building up over a period of years, so that you have organically derived but connected buildings from the same sort of architectural typology. The third one is to enhance pedestrian connectivity in and around the site. The city has a 2017 Streetscape master plan. I had the honor of sitting on that committee when it was being drafted, but it really calls for strong sidewalks on all frontages, bus connections, bicycle mobility improvements, a series of streetscape furniture, and a common set of streetscape elements, a common language and vocabulary, if you will. And we want to help to be able to deliver that. The fourth design driver was to find a way to attract non-residential foot traffic and non-residential anchors at a time when retail and office asset classes are suffering. And as Adam mentioned, Atlantic has really given a lot of thought about the concept of net new commercial on the site and how it all works and the type of commercial. And that goes right into number 5, which is to think about the right kind of residential. Residential that helps address the continuum of housing opportunities in downtown Falls Church, but residential that will also help ensure the economic success and the commercial viability of the downtown overall by simply getting more people out and about on the streets in downtown Falls Church. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the proposed development, as we've conceived it, really has 3 components. And I think it's better, Ms. Bazemore, if we can go to the next slide. It's probably easier if we look at the color-coded version. Okay. So the first component is shown in red. As I mentioned before, it's repositioning George Mason Square and the plaza. The second one is to maintain 150 South Washington Street, do some facade enhancements to match the proposed architecture of the new mixed-use building. And the third one, shown in blue, is the new mixed-use building. And interspersed in there are a couple of key open spaces, one of which is what we'll call the Woonerf, which is going to be a shared Dutch-style living street, which will act as an extension of George Mason Square. And then what to do with the open space parking lot that's at the corner of Maple and Annandale, across from the bowling alley. If we can go to the next slide. So to talk about George Mason Square for a moment, we all know George Mason Square. We've probably all walked through there. Right now, it's a lot of dead space. It was built in 1980, and it looks pretty much, that area just looks every bit of it when you walk there. Very underutilized space, and it's not very welcoming or inviting to pedestrians whatsoever. So the concept here is to retain the existing 91,000 square foot 3-building complex, but to remove, to do some serious facade enhancements at the ground level, what we all experience. So that includes removal of the arcade that is at the intersection, making the ground floor experience much more welcoming and inviting and ultimately successful. So this includes removal of that arcade, facade enhancements for the first 2 floors, renovating the ground floor pedestrian plaza with landscaping and hardscaping and seating areas and new lighting and overhead lighting, and adding ground level bump outs for restaurant uses along South Washington Street. If you walk by that section of South Washington Street, the sidewalk is overly large. There's usually newspapers floating about there during periods of high wind. It's certainly a sort of a quieter area. And we're kind of thinking it'd be somewhat similar to the bump out that was provided for 4Ps on the West Broad frontage. But we think there's a lot of opportunity there to really liven up that frontage. If we can go to the next slide. And then there's the new mixed-use building. The new mixed-use building would see the demolition of the former BB&T building and the Matt's Tailoring building. Together, those comprise of about 37,000 square feet of commercial uses, and tearing down the existing parking garage and replacing it with a new 430,946 square foot mixed-use building. This new mixed-use building would be LEED Gold certified. The building's architecture will be variegated to, again, sort of provide an organic nature, more pedestrian scale as well. We are also proposing to replace the existing garage with a much more modern, much more efficient parking structure, which is critical to leasing and, frankly, access to the entire downtown. And as some of you all know, there is an existing agreement between the city and Atlantic Realty to provide parking nights and weekends for visitors. And we are in the process of looking at that agreement and seeing how that all works to be able to provide continued access going forward. In terms of commercial, 25% of the square footage would be net new commercial in the new mixed-use building. That includes 109,000 square feet of new commercial uses. Of that, about 66,000 square feet would be retail or restaurant or retail service uses and medical service uses on the first floor of all street frontages. As I mentioned, we brought on KNLB for our retail programming. The retail program is under review. We have also designated approximately 26,000 square feet to be used by a single retail tenant near the intersection of West Broad Street and Maple Avenue. We have 43,000 square feet of office, flex office commercial uses on the second and third floor of the mixed-use building. And that could include office, it could include medical office, service tech, maybe even limited retail uses as well. In terms of residential, we are proposing 246 new residential uses that comprise about 321,000 square feet of space, which when you include all the amenities for all the residents, you get to that 321,000 square feet. In terms of the breakdown of the 246 new residential units, 71% of those would be studios, one bedrooms with work areas. And we're specifically focusing on the work areas, which, a year and a half ago, we might not have thought about, but especially in a post-COVID world where we are going to be working from home just a little bit more than we had been, even once things get back to hopefully the new normal. We think there's going to be a lot of opportunities there for home office uses. And 29% of the units would be 2 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms with dens. There would, of course, be a series of private amenities provided within the proposed mixed-use building for both the commercial and office tenants. If we can go to the next slide, please. I mentioned the sort of the living street, if you will, the Wunurf, which is situated between George Mason Square and the proposed new mixed-use building. And this would come out directly across the street from Mr. Brown's Park. So if you're sitting at Mr. Brown's Park, just look directly across West Broad Street, and that's where this would sort of daylight. This is intended, as I said earlier, as a Dutch-style living street that would feature high-quality pavers, overhead accent lighting, landscaping, hardscape treatments, and parallel parking for adjacent retailers as well. But it's really intended to be a spatial extension of the revitalized George Mason Square courtyard. Because as I mentioned before, when you go into George Mason Square, it just sort of ends. It doesn't take you anywhere. And there's nowhere to continue on. And so what this is proposed to be is sort of an extension of that. We're proposing to line the Wunurf with retail so that you can go through George Mason Square and it becomes sort of the center of this larger sort of retail activated area. The Wunurf would be, we're programming that to be able to be closed off periodically for special events and fairs. We're also proposing at the end of it, and there's in the upper left-hand corner, you can sort of see it, but at the end of it to be able to draw people in and again, sort of activate the street frontage, we're proposing a 30 by 40 exterior visual screen, LED screen, which could be used for screen on the green events when this is closed off, coverage of live city events and performances like Watch Night or the Memorial Day Parade or concerts or something like that. The total distance between the buildings is about 60 feet. So it's a pretty substantial space when it's all closed off. And of course, this would provide an entrance to the parking garage during periods when it's not closed off. And the other thing about the VUNRF that I would mention as well is that it does help to break up the block. So one of the aspects of the application that we're proposing, when you're over at Dogwood or at Brown's Hardware and you're thinking about the CVS, that's a long block, right? I mean, that's like 500, 600 feet. So one of the aspects of the application that we're proposing is a mid-block crossing at the end of the VUNRF, probably on the west side of the VUNRF, that will connect this with the Hunan West Broad restaurant and the Mr. Brown's Park, that alley there. And there would be we're also proposing a hawk pedestrian signal to be able to stop traffic, to allow pedestrians to walk. But again, the whole concept here is to get people moving about and providing better pedestrian circulation throughout the entirety of downtown. If we can go to the next slide. This is a slide that shows some of the transportation aspects of it, and I just want to mention a couple of things about it. First, in terms of landscaping, we have a series of trees and plants and flower beds. We'll have opportunities for biofiltration and the maintenance of biodiversity. At the lower end of the screen of the picture, you can see that triangular park. We are proposing to upgrade that park, turn it from all pervious or impervious area to an impervious park, open space for this area of the city. And I think it's extremely important because, if you go back to the city center concept that was previously approved, or you think about the future that could occur in this sort of back of house area, eventually there will be dense development here. Might be 20 years down the line or whatever, but at some point in time, we're going to need some green lungs for this section of downtown. There needs to be a complementary park, just like Mr. Brown's Park, on this section of town. The other thing, too, that I will mention is that the city is currently in a study right now to look at upgrading the intersection of Maple and Annandale Road. That's it's an intersection that can be difficult to traverse, and they are looking at both a standard sort of four-legged mast arm intersection, and then they're also looking at a traffic circle. And the traffic circle concept, the rotary concept, goes back to the 2005 comprehensive plan. We are in favor of the traffic circle. We've conveyed that, and we've been comparing notes and sharing our engineering with the city's engineers. My understanding, and Ms. Ruzzi can confirm this, my understanding is that the city's engineers are going to be issuing a report. It'll be put before the city council for review of both options, and then they'll pick one of the options. And so, we've kind of been working collectively with the city on those options, and that's all kind of running in tandem. So I wanted to mention that as well. But the whole concept of the traffic circle that we feel is that it will turn this back of house area of the city into a new center for the downtown, to be a good extension of it. In terms of some of the transportation aspects of it, this does, believe it or not, show a reduction over what could otherwise be built as a matter of right under the site's existing B2 district today. We are proposing to upgrade all of the sidewalks in concert with the streetscape standards, which call for wider sidewalks than the zoning ordinance does. So we are pushing the building back in conjunction or in accordance with those new policies. We are proposing a new bus shelter along West Broad Street. There is an existing bus stop with a flag out there today and some benches, but we will be providing new bus shelter in accordance with the bus stop and bus shelter master plan. As I mentioned, we are also proposing the mid-block crossing. We are proposing a series of bike and pedestrian upgrades at Maple Avenue and Annandale Road in conjunction with whatever the city chooses, whether it's the rotary or the new intersection. The parking garage, as I mentioned, would have a number of spaces, but we are examining the prior parking agreement that the city has with Atlantic Realty and how that's all going to work with our voluntary concessions on a going forward basis. We have 148 locked bicycle spaces, 20 exterior spaces, and of course we have submitted a transportation impact study, a parking management plan, a shared parking analysis, and a TDM plan as well. Now, if we can go to the next slide. So at this point in time, I think I'd like to turn it over to Thomas Ninny, our architect with DCS Design, to walk you through the architecture, some of the pretty pictures, and the floor plates, and then he'll turn it back over to me. So, Thomas, are you on the line?
I sure am. Thank you.
Sure.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Dinny. I'm the Vice President with Darius Carr Scott, and I've been working on this project with the team for quite some time. So we can see this slide that is shown in front of you is an overall picture of the existing George Mason Square with the new buildings in the background. We actually took this in a day. It was a snowy day, and we decided to, create an image like this. So let's start with the next slide, please. Okay, I thought we were going to start with the floor plans. There we go. Thank you very much. So, if we all know the site is not a complete flat site. It slopes from West Broad Street down to West Annandale. So this image here is what we call on a grade at the corner of West Annandale and Maple Avenue, where we will have some retail. We have the residential lobby main entrance, and then we'll have an entrance to the garage from South Maple Avenue that will be directly for the retail that's above on the floor above this. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Here is the main body of the project of the retail west, right off of West Broad Street. As Andrew explained, the Woolnerf comes in off of West Broad Street. It's going to be very heavily activated with retail on both sides. Our intent is to take the existing George Mason buildings and tear the first floor in terms of add more windows, add doors, retail, so it's very active on the base of the building. And then repeating the same thing on the other side of the Woolnerf, which is on the brand new building. And then we'll have, as you can see on the corner of South Maple and Broad Street, we'll have a major retail center at that location. We're talking to one tenant at that time for this space. And on this level, you can also see how you can access the garage from West Broad Street through the Woolnerf, or you can also access the garage from South Washington Street. And again, every single level is connected, so you can arrive to all the levels, even if you come in from West Annandale and South Maple below. So, next, please. Next slide, please. On this plan, as we go up the building, because the first floor retail is a high bay space, we were able to create a mezzanine that will be on top of the retail, on the lower retail that's facing the Woolnerf. We have created a mezzanine in which we're looking at having a specific tenant. And there's probably more of a entertainment venue that will have also some type of outdoor plaza, balcony overlooking the main plaza of the project. So, and also, again, as you can see, it is connected to the garage, so every level you can park and go into the buildings. Next slide, please. At this level is what we're adding the new office spaces. The idea here is that we're going to have the building on the perimeter of it will have office space, and in the center we'll have some type of think about it like a conference center, something that can be used by the existing George Mason Square buildings and the brand new office building. So it's a community space. People can go and relax and exercise, use it as for meeting rooms and other things in there in the middle. Because we're trying to take advantage that the building is quite deep, so therefore in the middle of the building, we can add all these different uses. Again, you can see it is connected to the garage. Next, please. Here you see the first floor when we start going into the residential. The residential is a double loaded corridor on the top of West Broad Street in South Maple. As it goes down towards West Annandale, it becomes single loaded. And the reason for that is because we actually have a garage, as you can see in the middle, and the residential is wrapping around the garage. And again, every single of the residential will be tied to the garage. Next slide, please. This image is our top level of the residential and also the top level of the garage. The idea here is to have an outdoor plaza, which will consist of, some pools area, some landscaping area, possibly maybe some type of a garden that could be for planting, some type of, fruits and vegetables. We talked about that, and also in the corner, you can see in yellow on South Washington is the main room, which would be for events. Next slide, please. Here are some of the images of the building. As Andrew explained, the concept of what we've done here is that so it's not just one building, it's essentially a series of buildings that's been built through time. You can see the top left image is in the corner, and you can see the entrance to the main, as we have a sign that says the main grocery store. And as you go to the right-hand side, you see the same image turning a little bit into West Broad Street. And on the bottom, you can see again the slides of the Wooner. As you can see the big screen, and above the screen, we actually have a green wall to help to, for one thing is to hide the garage and make something very interesting in terms of the architecture. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the two-story space and the mezzanine with the balcony, as we described, facing the main plaza. Next slide, please. As we continue down the road, we can see the buildings, how they change shape, and you can see the residential above it. And our intent, again, is, as we said, so this is a number of different buildings that we have built throughout. You can see the base entrances to the garages. We have in this corner a little bit more of a classical windows with some articulation to try and change the look of the buildings, more of the residential side. Next slide, please. All right, Andrew, I think that this is...
Yeah, if we could go, Mr. Bazemore, if we could go back a few slides to slide 15, I believe, which are the earlier renderings. And Thomas, these are just wanted to show you, if you could walk through the views of
Sure.
George Mason Square. That's okay.
Right, there we go.
Thank you.
Go. So here are the images of the renovation of George Mason Square. As you can see, the top left corner is South Washington Street. You can see how we've actually taken the first two floors of the building, adding more windows, adding more glass, adding stores, changing the uses, and making it into something more exciting and walkable as we go through and around the building. On the next slide, you can see that is the area that is in between the two existing office buildings. Can we go back, please? Thank you. If you look at the slide in between the two office buildings, our intent at that point is to actually add seating and planters and other uses in there, because, well, for one thing, if you have a restaurant and if we have outdoor seating, we need to be careful about the different liquor licenses. So therefore, we have to put some type of a barriers around the seating on that. So the idea is to create some type of a planters to help us with something that is a little more pleasant. So, and you can see again on the bottom right corner, a very similar image that we showed you a little while earlier when it was more on a snowy day. So you can see the new George Mason Square.
And Ms. Bazemore, if we can now, thank you very much, Thomas. If we can go back to the slide, and I'm sorry that these were out of order. That was my fault. One more. So just to touch on these real quick, a couple of the issues that were raised that we've heard from City Council, and we don't have answers to them tonight. These are things that I just wanted to let you know what the issues are that have been raised. What is the commitment to housing affordability? We all saw what Insight Properties did with Broad and Washington, the fiscal impact. And I just want to say this as well as the anchor commitment. We do not want to overpromise specific tenants or something like that just to get the project approved, only to have the tenant in this volatile retail market walk. And then we're all scratching our heads as to say, how did we get duped? And, so we have, as Thomas had said, we are programming about 26,000 square feet at the intersection of South Maple and West Broad Street across from the CVS for a single use tenant. We've indicated that would be grocery stores, which would be great. Those discussions are ongoing with a potential tenant, but we don't want to have this project or the fiscal impact from a predictability perspective of the city's treasurer be dependent on something that we can't deliver. So the numbers that are in Ms. Witzman's fiscal impact analysis are not predicated upon having any anchor. They're predicated upon kind of like the base worst case scenario, what that is. Now, clearly, there's every incentive to have that be used for a single tenant. It's concrete construction, for example. It's high bay. It's two levels. So it lends itself naturally to wanting to have, a single user, and we're going to make every attempt to get there through this process. But I just wanted everyone to kind of know that from an anchor perspective and from a fiscal impact perspective, we're not counting on that. And I think that it's hopefully we're trying to be as transparent as and wise as possible on that. Public parking, again, what is the commitment going to be on a going forward basis? How are we going to accommodate the need for parking in the downtown area as the downtown grows, given that there's an existing agreement between Atlantic Realty and the city today? What protections are we providing for existing tenants? We obviously have 4Ps. We have a number of existing office tenants in the site today. We need to be able to engage with those existing businesses and make sure that they are not negatively affected during the construction process. Public art opportunities, obviously very important. There was a question about potentially providing some sort of mid-block cut through or some sort of pedestrian connection between South Maple and the Woonerf, where the LED screen would be. And then there's also a question about the quality of the retail, the activation of the Woonerf, given its size, given its location. We want it to be as successful as possible, and we don't want that to be sort of second-rate dead space, especially when all along West Broad Street, for example, there is retail space that are even in more prominent locations that are struggling to be leased. So, making sure that we've got a good retail plan there and that the use mix and how that Woonerf is treated all works together so that it blends seamlessly and is successful. So those are a few issues, and there were more, obviously. Not to mention, staff has given us, 40 some odd pages of technical comments that need to be addressed and other policy comments as well. So at this point in time, I'd like to, the final part of this presentation, I'd like to recognize Pete Crawford from Urban Engineering just to talk about stormwater. And there's just a couple of slides. If we could skip the next slide, Ms. Bazemore, and we can go straight to the last two. We can skip over this one, I think. Okay, Peter, you on the line?
I am, and I know you said it's the final, and I know it's the most exciting part as well. So my name's Pete Crawford. I'm with Urban Engineering. We're the civil engineers for the project. And what this slide shows and what I wanted to explain to the group was essentially that the existing site is currently fully developed. A majority of the existing site is impervious today. With the proposed redevelopment, we are anticipating a decrease in impervious area, which is a great positive benefit to the environment. And we're doing that through converting the existing parking lot on the southern side of this slide into open space, as well as adding streetscape planters and various vegetated areas around the site. The number one goal for our stormwater strategy is really to protect the downstream water resources of the city and then ultimately the greater Chesapeake Bay watershed from pollution and flooding from stormwater events. So the site will be graded to adequately drain runoff into storm inlets throughout the sites or stormwater planters throughout the site as well. After the water is collected, it's then routed downstream where before it leaves the site, it'll be treated for water quality. Currently, the strategy is to treat the water with a combination of bioretention, stormwater planters, which is a version of bioretention, as well as manufactured filtering devices. On the map, you can see that most of these facilities are positioned on the low end of the site. And while they're all clustered currently in one area, the purpose of that is to maximize the amount of the site that can actually be treated, because the runoff from the site is generally flowing from Page North to Page South to West Annandale. After the water is treated, the water is also then collected in an underground stormwater management vault, which treats the rate of runoff before it leaves the site. And that vault will be designed to mitigate the 1 year, the 2 year, and the 10-year storm events. So essentially the water drains into that, it gets held in that storage vault, and then it's released at a slower rate than what it's coming into the vault. If you go to the next slide, this is really just example images of the stormwater techniques that we're anticipating. So from left to right, on the left is a stormwater planter, which is essentially a bioretention type facility that would be up against the building where runoff gets routed from the roof through a downspout system, and it gets treated in the bioretention media. The middle slide, or the middle picture, is a manufactured filtering device, which is again an underground chamber filled with cartridges where the water flows into that and essentially filters through a proprietary media, which cleans the water before it exits that vault. And then on the right side of this page is a typical ground level bioretention, which we're also anticipating on the site, not necessarily in this configuration, but water would enter into landscaped areas. There's then a particular media within the soil that's specifically designed for the water to infiltrate through that, treat the water, and then it leaves the bottom of the facility through an under drain system and then gets routed downstream to the stormwater management vault. So that, in a nutshell, is the stormwater management concept. And again, really the goal is to, one, treat the water before it leaves the site for both quality and quantity, with the overall goal of protecting the water resources of the city. So Andrew, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Pete. Mr. Chairman, I think that concludes our presentation, and we do appreciate everyone's comments, and I am happy that this is a new process of getting at least the heads of or representatives from all the boards and commissions early in the process. So we welcome your feedback and constructive criticism.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Painter, and thank you to the rest of the applicant development team. That was an informative presentation. We'll jump right into it, and like I said at the outset, just to make the best use of everyone's time, I'll ask that folks use the raise hand tool, and then we're going to start, I think, with the boards and commission representatives, and we'll get to the planning commissioners at the end. I would just ask, I'll call on folks and just identify, what board or commission you're representing and or are a member of, and we'll try to keep comments to just a couple minutes. We do have a bunch of folks, I'm sure, who'd like to speak, and we budgeted so much time for tonight. So with that, I'll open the floor, I guess, to any folks who want to provide comments, ask questions. All right.
From the EDA, may I start off?
Sure. Okay. Go ahead.
I'll be short and sweet. I've got 3 or 4 points that I'd like to make that the EDA has discussed this to a limited extent. First comment is we really like the proposed fixes on the first 2 floors of the existing buildings, but wondering if some additional work can be done above that, particularly along the roof line. Secondly, we're very keen to see the courtyard activated as well as the frontage along South Washington. My second comment is about the parking. For obvious reasons, I'm a big believer in a developer being able to figure out what they really need. But I'm wondering whether almost 1,000 spaces is really necessary, and would encourage the applicant to take a hard look at that and see if it can't be reduced, perhaps significantly with TDMs and other similar devices. A mention, you've talked about a big sign. One of the problems that we've had with using the available public parking at nights and weekends is signage, of which there is none. So I'm hoping the VCs will include a provision that on that sign from time to time, it can say there's public parking at the appropriate times. And my final comment is it's going to be very important to have the existing business owners on board with the plan during construction. Obviously that first and foremost, that's Calm Dillon at 4 Ps, which may not be impacted at all, but could be impacted greatly depending upon the plan, of which I'm not aware. Those are my comments from the EDA, Mr. Chairman.
Great. No, thank you, Mr. Young. And for the applicant, obviously, we're not expecting you to respond to, all these comments and questions on the spot. I mean, unless there's something, an easy answer, but just more to take note of the comments and that way we can go through it. And of course, like I said, if something comes to your mind that you want to immediately respond, by all means. But otherwise, we'll keep on going through so we can get to everybody. Okay, the next hand I saw up was Mr. Anderson, Rolf Anderson.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, we hear you.
Here, I'll see if I can be visual. Hi, I'm Rolf Anderson. I'm the chair of the Stormwater Task Force. And my usual question, and we're a task force of about 7 members, is, what measures do you have planned? And you did a great job of showing the measures that you have planned for stormwater. So let me just say that we're very supportive of commercial development and smart development, and there's a lot of good aspects to this project. The proposal has some very nice features. I think the planters that you identified, some of the open space, the pedestrian focus, the trees that you have surrounding the area, LEED Gold standard. A couple of concerns just to keep in mind. This is our first kind of look at this. The footprint of it is quite a massive building, and I realize that you're reducing the impervious area, and that's actually one of our goals, is to be looking at that. But it is quite a coverage of the area. So to be mindful of green space and open spaces, and there might be other opportunities for you to explore that as you develop this further, whether that would be on the roof or around on the pedestrian areas on the sides or on the Woonerf or in the access area. I think it makes it more pleasant in terms of living, and it also gives you more opportunities for bioretention. In terms of the the sidewalks or the driveways, of course, we'd like you to use permeable pavers and use the opportunity to be using that area for bioretention and filtration as well. I don't think I was not clear on the Woonerf if that basically looks like a driveway into the parking garage for the most part. So that might be an opportunity there to do something in terms of permeability and moving and retaining some of the water that you might explore further as you develop this. It's not our bailiwick, really. The height gives some concern to me, but that's just a preliminary observation. The roof, you might have some opportunities there for additional green space, gardens, green roof kind of options. You definitely identified some of that, and that's an opportunity. So we'd just like you to explore those as you develop this further. Thanks. That's all I have to say for tonight.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And now the next hand, I think I'm having similar problems to what Mr. Stoddard was saying at the beginning. I see a hand, but I'm only seeing initials. So I'm seeing JG has their hand up, and I apologize, I can't see the names all of a sudden, and I don't know what's going on with my Microsoft Teams here, but.
Hi, that's me. My name is Jason Garman. I'm the Vice Chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee on Transportation.
Okay, go ahead, man.
Thank you. So thank you again for taking the time to present this to us at this early stage. I think it's great to have the opportunity to make some preliminary comments here before we really get into the weeds and into the details. So from the Transportation Committee's perspective, I think there's a couple of main items that, upon preliminary review the plans that we would like to comment on at this stage, but of course, certainly looking forward to further opportunity to really dig into the details, as I said earlier, but realize that that's not quite what we're doing here tonight. So just first comment was really surrounding the roundabout. Obviously, what I've learned here tonight is that this, the city is working on those alternatives, of which the roundabout is one. I think in traffic engineering studies, they've shown with proper application to be safer in many cases, but particularly, but we do still see particular challenges with cyclists utilizing roundabouts, particularly cyclists that are not necessarily the strongest ones, potentially some, rather inexperienced cyclists, or it can be an intimidating type of facility for less experienced cyclists. And so I think that's certainly a main consideration that we'd like to make sure that gets incorporated in the decision between keeping it a signal control intersection versus changing to a roundabout. One mitigating way to do that is to extend bike lanes through the roundabout as opposed to stopping them on either side. There's this, I think staff made a comment about that, pertaining to that as well. So I think that's definitely an opportunity to explore making robust bicycle infrastructure at that intersection, regardless of the form that it takes. And we think that as far as the cycling infrastructure goes, particularly on the backside of the development, both on Maple and Annandale, there's great opportunity to really create some robust cycling infrastructure to connect this part of the city to kind of the southwest corner of the city, which is more suburban, more car-oriented, and less welcoming to other non-automotive modes of transportation. And there's a lot of great commercial development, shops and restaurants in that section of the city, the southwest corner as well, that we think there's great opportunity to kind of connect that area to the downtown core, so to speak, through robust, pedestrian and cycling infrastructure. And that we think also helps to meet the city's goals on transportation equity, as well as environmentally friendlier modes of transportation. One additional comment, particularly related to pedestrian circulation. We'll definitely like the idea of the mid-block crossing on Broad near the Windorf. We'd like to potentially explore the opportunity for a mid-block crossing on South Washington as well. Understand that is potentially more challenging given the U.S. highway designation of South Washington, as well as the emergency evacuation designation, and that might present challenges for a mid-block crossing, but we think it's an opportunity potentially to explore, particularly connecting to the the West Annandale driveway where the loading docks and the parking entry are. That almost kind of lends itself to a pedestrian cut through in that area to get down to the South Village shops, kind of where Bake Shop and Audacious Ale Works, and even further down to where Aldi is. That all that commercial development there is I think there's a real opportunity to connect pedestrian facilities to those locations. The skew of the Annandale and Washington intersection kind of makes the pedestrian flow from the project site over to those commercial developments a little awkward. And so I think there's an opportunity there for a mid-block crossing. But understanding that there might be challenges from the traffic engineering side of things as well. And then the couple last comments. One was on the rapid bus transit plan for Route 7 for Broad Street. We think that there's an opportunity to make sure that we provide for robust bus station and pedestrian waiting areas for that potential rapid transit line on Broad Street that matches the higher level of service that the rapid system provides. And so we think there's a great opportunity there to make sure that the robustness of the waiting area and the infrastructure to support the rapid transit system matches the higher level of service that it provides. And then the last comment is on parking. I agree with Mr. Young's comment that the parking number was a bit eye-opening when I first saw it. Admittedly, I haven't dug through in detail on the parking and transportation demand management plans yet, but looking forward to doing that as well to make sure that we're, turning over every stone that we can from a transportation demand management perspective to reduce the parking to the extent that we can and reduce the vehicle trips to the site that we can. So thank you very much for taking the time tonight again and for hearing us out on our initial comments.
Thank you, Jason. That was great. Next comment, or sorry, next hand we have up is Mary Chavis. Mary, are you with us here? All right, not hearing her. Let's see, we'll go on to the next person. And again, I apologize. All of a sudden, I'm having trouble seeing folks.
I am here.
Oh, you're here, Mary? Okay, great.
Hitting the wrong button. I am representing the VPIS this evening, and we have not had a discussion yet within the board on this project, but I am reflecting comments and initial ideas from some of the members. We generally believe that new city development projects should make a strong environmental contribution to help address climate change and to provide adequate green outdoor space for both the new residents and the public. I had not understood that the new park was technically part of the project, but from this evening's presentation, it looks as though it is. And so our question would be whether the park and the proposed landscape plantings within the project would meet the 15% green space that the city has as an objective for new development projects. The project as a whole has a great deal of impermeable land space, and so we're very interested in whether you can increase particularly the green space within the project itself. We would also encourage the use of green or solar roofs, stormwater retention that substantially exceeds the minimum city requirement, and significant numbers of electric charging stations. One question we have on the street trees is whether you would be planning to eliminate the large street trees that now exist along Broad Street and replace them with small trees that will take several years to grow to canopy size. That would be a concern. This area initially was designed to be part of the city's core commercial area, as you have mentioned, which was to be focused on Class A office and hotels. And more recently, the city has accepted it as mixed use. But this addition would be primarily residential, largely one bedroom, and it would mimic the other projects we've been seeing throughout the city, with some new retail and office, perhaps another grocery store. With 1,500 apartments already in the queue, we wonder if we've gotten stuck on one model for all new projects in the city. At 115 feet tall, this would be the highest structure in this part of the city. It would cast strong shadows and reduce sunlight for other Broad Street retail, Browns Park, and the city street trees. Does it need to be this tall? We'd prefer to see step backs along the face of the project to give room for light to enter and the street trees to grow. On the traffic study, it doesn't appear to take into account increased traffic from the recently approved projects. We're concerned about the projected congestion at the two major intersections, which are expected to operate at unacceptable levels of service at peak hours, even after mitigation with synchronized timing of traffic lights, and without reference to the new Broad and Washington project, catty corner to this one. The Hawk idea of having a crossing mid-block controlled by pedestrians would only compound problems of congestion during peak hours, and it could risk accidents with pedestrians. Ideally, traffic entering the Woondarf should be right turn only, as should traffic exiting it. We believe the proposed traffic circle at Maple and Annandale should be dropped in favor of a signalized intersection for both vehicle and pedestrian safety, including those accessing the new proposed park. Those are our initial comments, and I appreciate your time to take to listen to us this evening.
Great, thank you, Mary. The next name I saw was, is it Mary Bedetti? I believe. Did I get that right? Mary Bedetti? All right, not seeing her. And now, of course, again, I'm having this problem with Teams. So
the name, I'm sorry, the mute button was on.
It's Maureen. I'm sorry, it's Maureen.
Right. Well, I guess I have to begin with who I am and qualify my remarks based upon that. I've lived in the city for about 25 years. I live way down at the at the eastern end near Seven Corners in Wren's Way. I've been here for more than 25 years. I have served on the CACT as chair and the Planning Commission, and I'm currently vice president of the Falls Church Arts and co-president of Cherry Hill, the Friends of Cherry Hill. I am Falls Church Arts representative to the Arts and Humanities Council. So that in that regard, I'm probably just trying to get information because I'm new to that representing Falls Church Arts at that commission. And I don't know anything about this project except what I've heard this evening. So probably speaking mostly from Falls Church Arts and Cherry Hill, my concern would be for the arts, for theater, for history and culture, and whether or not you said public art, I'm not sure what that refers to. I'd like to have a little more information on that. But one of the things that all of particularly the arts and the theater need are space, whether it's performance space or classroom space or that sort of thing. That might be something that would be interesting to see. I know that there's talk of it in other developments. The one kind of kitty corner, I don't know where that stands at this point for Creative Cauldron, which I'm also involved in. But having heard some of the proposals and the other commission members who've spoken to them, and to be a person who walks from, pretty much one end of Falls Church to the other, and being 76 years old, I'm really surprised that you find the block between Broad and Maple so long that it needs to have a crosswalk. I think the traffic implications are kind of problematic. If you add another stop, even if it's pedestrian controlled, I just don't see the need for that. And I walk there a lot, and there's not a lot of, certainly not a lot of pedestrian traffic at this point. Even with COVID, I'm up in there a lot. The water retention, having been a graduate student in geography and looked at water resources, and given the climate situation, I am surprised that you are basing the water retention on a 10-year probability. That seems to me somewhat short-sighted. Most other, I know it's a development, but most other things are based at least on 100 years, and those sometimes fail. I really don't see the need for another grocery store. I know you did mention that that might not be what was there, but that just doesn't seem to me a very strong draw. So anyway, those would be some of my comments, mostly on my own personal input. except for the theater, the arts, the history, and the culture, and knowing more about that, and making sure that that's taken into account in the planning.
Great. Thank you, Maureen. All right. And now, again, I can see we have another hand up, but honestly, I apologize. I can't see who the hand is. So if your hand is still up, just have at it.
That might be me.
Now I can see your name, Michael.
Yeah, there you go. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Mike Trauberman, and I'm a member of both the Environmental Sustainability Council and its Energy Transition Subcommittee. And I wish everyone a happy Earth Week and have a nice Earth Day tomorrow. Reduction of greenhouse gases is a top priority for the ESC. Federal, state, and city governments have established aggressive goals to reduce greenhouse emissions. And I think tomorrow the Biden administration is expected to announce a new national goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030. And the city itself has endorsed an 80% reduction by 2050. Those are aggressive goals, and this building needs to be part of the solution as to how we achieve those goals. Now, every new building constructed in the city actually will increase greenhouse gas emissions unless it's designed to be net zero carbon. Which means that it needs to be very energy efficient. It needs to use only electric energy, and the electricity it uses must be renewable. So the ESC encourages the applicant to design a building that is close to net zero carbon as possible. We read through a lot of materials. We solicited recommendations, comments, and questions, which go on for about a page and a half from our members, but we really haven't had a chance to meet as a group to endorse specific items. But those questions and comments are in a memo that was sent to the Planning Commission earlier today. I assume it'll be part of the public record. And I'd just like to highlight a few of them because there are many of them. First thing, we're encouraged by the commitment to, and I'm going to use the applicant's words from the statement of justification, green building measures consistent with LEED Gold standards. And I guess we asked the question, does that mean we're going to be certifying this building using LEED at the gold standard? So that's an initial question. Some of the other things that I'd just like to highlight are climate, air, and energy. Again, we'd like to aim for net zero carbon building using energy efficient design, electrification, on and off-site renewables, and credits for energy efficiency improvements, and renewable energy generation at the existing buildings. It's not clear what renovations and improvements will be going on at those two buildings, but we'd like to get more details. We encourage a minimum of 20% energy performance improvement over LEED version 4, which is, I believe, the new SE ordinance as one of the secondary criteria asks for that. We'd like to have maximum points in the LEED energy and atmosphere category, full electrification of building systems, in the residential units, use of Energy Star appliances, including clothes dryers, Energy Star or LED light fixtures, and on-site generation for solar on all buildings, if feasible, co-located with vegetated roofs. We also encourage maximum EV charging stations in the garages, and we would like at least 5% for residential parking spaces and 4% for new and existing office and retail spaces. Some of the other people who've spoken have mentioned they'd appreciate reductions in parking. We agree with that, and we encourage the use of alternative transportation, such as transit, mass transit, ride sharing, bicycling, and walking. Maybe with that you could even reduce the proposed height of the building. Well, we have a lot more, but I'll stop with that. I think a lot of the others have been covered by other folks who've spoken. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Let's see. I see. Maureen, your hand is back up. Before maybe we go back to other people again, I just want to make sure that we get through everybody. Okay, I mean, for the boards and commission members, I guess I'm not seeing anyone else's hands up. I mean, I think the next thing we would do would be to go to the planning commission members themselves. And so I'll open it up to members of the planning commission.
Brent, I'm supposed to be in another meeting right now anyway, so I just wanted, my only comment was to look at the other developments, particularly in traffic areas. So I'm going to go because I'm supposed to be at another meeting.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for including me. Bye.
Okay. So again, I'm going to open it up to members of the commission. Anyone wants to provide some comments at this time? Again, I can't see, and I got to see who's raising their hand. We got to work out this team stuff. Is that you, Melissa? All right, now once you turn the camera on, now I see you. So go ahead, Ms. Teets.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just have a few comments. Like one, I am concerned about the height of this because there is no step backs anywhere. And while I recognize that it's entirely between streets and there are no houses nearby, it still looks very monolithic. And even on buildings, like if you look at West Broad, where they're at Broad Street, where they're next to a business, they have stepped back from that corner a little bit, and they have a lot more articulation of the building. So that building is fairly tall, and it doesn't seem that tall at the street level. So I think that there really needs to be some look at that height and some ability to step back a little bit, maybe at the corner, so it just doesn't overwhelm that Maple and Broad Street corner like it does to me looking at the photos. I know this is probably not the final architecture, but it does seem pretty bland right now. It's hard to tell without seeing the materials. It seems pretty one note, and a lot of the materials and colors just from the sketches, but I know it's sketches. So I hope that when we get closer to really looking at this for votes, that we get to see some materials, we get to see better articulation on the architecture, we get to see a little bit more step backs, that we get rid of that monolithic feel it has right now. I mean, that Dutch Street seemed really cool, except that basically it looks to me like it's a road where you can parallel park, and I guess if you parallel park, you're going to have to drive through the garage to leave, because I don't know if there's any way to turn around and U-turn on that street. So that's kind of interesting. I assume that you guys have it set up so if you come in and parallel park, then you can exit out the garage somewhere. But and maybe the point of that street is that you can close it down at some point and make it a pedestrian mall street, kind of like temporarily for a festival. But as of it is right now, it's car centric. So I don't see this festiveness to it as it currently is. And maybe there's some ability to put a little bit more green along that street to make it more festive. You know, and I get that we're getting the green space across the street at that park, and the park is a nice size, and I appreciate it. But within the project itself, it just doesn't seem like there's enough green. And I question, like, are we getting, I assume we're getting the 15%, but it just, you know, I think if I was at the project, the way it looks, at least in the sketches, I would just feel like it's very utilitarian a little bit, because I just don't see the green there. I think that was my big thing. Oh, and the anchor. So, we've been told maybe a grocery store, maybe this, that you guys are in talks. But I do hope as we get closer to first reading that there's more clarity on what kind of retail we're going to have there. I think, and it doesn't have to be a grocery store. It can be what it is. But I mean, I find the little Target down at Lincoln to be a great ad. I mean, I love shopping at the little Target. So it doesn't have to be a grocery store. But I think I'm concerned that we don't really know what this anchor is. And while the small spaces will hopefully eventually fill, it's usually that anchor that really makes it someplace that other businesses want to be. So anyway, so those are all my comments.
Great, thank you, Ms. Teets. And again, I see someone else has their hand up, but I can't see their name. So whoever the other commissioner is right now, his hand is up. Go for it.
This is Rob Puentes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the presentation. I like the scale and the ambition of this project, especially where it is. I think it's a perfect place for a big project like this. I don't have any problems with the height or the massing. Again, I really like the way that it's the aggressiveness of it, quite frankly. Just a couple of questions though. The 40-year-old office space, I always thought that was hard to lease out because of something with the interior configuration of it. They were just an old style of office. So curious why just the facade is being addressed there, and if there's any ways to reconfigure the office space internally. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I thought there was something wrong with the old style that was in there. I absolutely agree with the EDA and CACT about the parking. It seems like an awful lot of parking, even for this big project. And again, out of step with where we've been doing a lot of other things, not just in the city, but in the region. I would support whatever kind of reductions you're looking for in parking. And curious, if you, as Mr. Young said, if you think you need all that parking to make this work, that's problematic. I think we need to figure out what's missing then to bring that down. Last thing, I thought that you guys spent a lot of time talking about your knowledge of the city and all the work you've done here, and the fact that there's nothing about affordable housing in here strikes me as pretty tone deaf and a little, again, out of touch with where the conversations have been going. I get that, there's a fiscal impact here and you don't know exactly what the project is going to look like. You did talk about a bunch of voluntary concessions around transportation, and I'd encourage you when we get to other discussions about this first reading, especially, just be more articulate about the commitment to affordable housing, because again, I know that that's a priority for the city, and since you're so involved, I would think you know that too. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Mr. Puentes. Okay, now I can see that Ms. Weiss has her hand up.
Hi, thank you, and to the applicant and to staff for pulling this meeting together. I want to just start by saying that I really appreciate this new approach to engaging boards and commissions early in the process, recognizing that it really is early in the process, and all of our boards and commissions have additional work to do to develop consensus and understand this. But I think it's terrifically valuable to get this kind of insight. I do think there's a lot of opportunity at this site, and I'm excited to see the site revive. I like the idea of an ambitious new project, as Mr. Puentes just said. I'm interested in seeing in future iterations and presentations of this, how this connects to additional development that's going on in the area. Are we developing sort of a cohesive look and feel? How are we ensuring that all of Broad and Washington are activated from development to development? I also wanted to underline the comments that there's a lot of parking. That's really surprising to me, particularly given the proximity of this particular site to transit. So I would really encourage finding ways to reduce that, particularly given the city's and goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And given how much of our greenhouse gas emissions comes from travel, I'd like to see the parking go down and more creative connections with the transit that we have available. I also want to encourage the applicant to look at recent best practice in the city. And when it comes to affordable housing, equity, and particularly climate change. I'd like to underline Kate Walker, the Environmental Program Coordinator's comment in the staff memo to take a look at Chapter 5 of the Comprehensive Plan. This design does not seem particularly innovative or forward-looking with respect to the impacts of climate change. Designing to a 10-year storm is insufficient for the increased precipitation that is likely to come our way. Similarly, I like the green space, but we need to think about increased temperatures in this area and how we're going to keep this place activated and welcoming in a warming climate. So again, I would just encourage the applicant to go review Chapter 5 and look at other best practice. I think the West Falls Church project is capturing the stormwater, the 10-year storm, plus an additional 10%, if I recall correctly. So we can do better, and I'd like to see that in this project going forward. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Ms. Weiss. Let's see here. Again, I was going to say it has to be Mr. Stevens because I hadn't heard from him yet. Do you see your hand is up, Mr. Stevens? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I saw quite a bit in the presentation that I can tie to Chapter 4 of the city's comprehensive plan. And just a couple of thoughts there. Having lived in New Zealand for a year, and they have an awful lot of traffic circles there, and I saw that they worked quite well. I'm hoping that there'll be, kind of an open mind and consideration of how that may well work where you have it proposed. I do agree with the comment from several city council members that trying to make a left-hand turn into that one-off off of Broad Street is going to be very challenging, and I encourage you to take another look at see whether or not that really is feasible. I'll echo the comments that have been made regarding Chapter 5 of our comprehensive plan and the need for you all to take a closer look at components of that plan and see where you can make some improvements in your proposal. What I'd like to see is something that would be the equivalent of a TDM for greenhouse gas emissions. Whereas the TDM, of course, is trying to reduce the number of single car trips. This kind of idea would give you an opportunity to explain what you're doing in kind of a comprehensive manner on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And that would include things like using electric rather than gas appliances, and to ensure that those appliances are as energy efficient as possible, above code insulation. There's been discussion on the electric vehicle charging equipment, and I think what you might want to consider there is something that would make it very clear that regardless of the number of existing and future charging equipment that you put in, that you won't charge any special construction charges to anybody who might want to charge their vehicle once the capacity that you have installed has been exhausted. So I'll leave it at that right now. We've got a lot of people that need to speak. So thank you very much for coming before us this evening and presenting what you have.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Let's see. I think that might be it. Although, wait a second. Is there another hand up? No. Mr. Puentes, I think your hand is just still up from before. Correct. So. Okay, yeah. So with that, I think that was probably it. I mean, I'll just to add, and again, I guess I don't know if it's one of the benefits to going last year is that most of my thunder has already been stolen with other comments. But I mean, just to underscore some of the things I just agreed with that I heard. First of all, I'm also intrigued by the decision to keep 150 South Washington. It's a 50-year-old Class B building. So I mean, there may be a very legitimate and logical reason, but curious to know what other alternatives might exist if that were to be, redeveloped as part of this. I also agree that WUNRF, and again, I think that term has a tendency or a possibility to be overused these days, but the WUNRF does seem a bit auto-oriented. A true WUNRF is really, more residential scale and, kids playing in the street and I don't know if the entrance to the garage really can attain what that term really is meant to be. Doesn't mean it can't be a good space, but we should be careful with throwing that term around. You know, just because it sounds like a sexy planning term. Also, you know, the anchor, you know, issue. I mean, I feel like, you know, the change in the city from maybe just a few years ago is, you know, this really speaks to community, you know, selling this to the community, the wider, you know, community of the city. You know, a grocery anchor is maybe less of a, you know, a selling point perhaps than it might have been a few years ago with all the grocery coming online, you know, that has come online and that it's, you know, planned to come online. So obviously there may be a niche that you're going for, but as Ms. Teets said, there may be other types of anchor tenants that, you know, maybe would be a better complementary fit to what's already here and what's already planned. I also agreed with the comment about being overparked. I think you've heard enough about that, you know. The idea that, I don't know if it was someone from council that you said mentioned the idea of providing some type of, even if it's a pedestrian, you know, way to get through this block. I mean, it still is quite massive. People coming up from, especially from the other side, from Maple or Annandale, to try to be able to, you know, navigate through the property. I think it'd be interesting if that could be done. And just last but not least, I like the roundabout. I also think we should call it a roundabout, not a traffic circle. We could call it a rotary if we were up in New England. Let's call it a roundabout, just because traffic circle sometimes has negative connotations with the wider public, people that aren't in the, you know, tuned into this stuff. So, but I do like that, and I know there may be some other challenges. I saw some, you know, some comments from staff on that, but I do think that that's an intersection in town where it could work, where the volumes could probably lend themselves to a roundabout. So I was happy to see that. So with that, you know, again, Mr. Payne, I'll give you just a few minutes to just, I'm not expecting you to respond to the dozens of comments you just received, but, you know, I certainly think it's fair. And, you know, if you'd like to, you know, provide any type of concluding remarks or response to some of what you've heard. We all realize it's very conceptual, and like was said, we really do appreciate this opportunity to get an early look at some of this while it's relatively easy for the team to, you know, pivot and make changes and revisions. And so with that, if, you know, if there's any sort of closing comments, you know, you and the rest of the team would like to make, I'll give you that opportunity.
So, you know, and I don't know if Pete or Maria Lashinger with Grow Slate is on. I just want to prep them. And then first of all, I really appreciate the opportunity. This is great feedback, right? I mean, it's good to do it at the start of the process, just to have this sort of informal work session and get some initial feedback. We did receive, Mr. Trauberman, we did receive your memo. Staff forwarded that along to us. We will look at that, and we're very cognizant of the fact that you know Chapter 5 of the comprehensive plan, but also the importance of sustainability. We've got to incorporate those features into our project. This will be a LEED certified building, just to clarify as well. We will, you know, the VUNERF, you know, that concept continues to be developed. I'm sorry that it was just depicted as kind of like a drive aisle. I think the concepts of, you know, the shared space and having an equal place for pedestrians and vehicles is absolutely important. And just to clarify, at the end of the VUNERF, that is an entrance to a parking garage. And Ms. Teets, where we were talking about, you know, the need to turn around and everything. We actually think that having an entrance to a garage there, of which there are 4 entrances, but this is one of the entrances. And so having the other 3 entrances does allow us to close it off, but it also allows to have vehicles be able to drive through that area, which will hopefully be able to help support the retail from a visibility perspective and make sure that retail is successful. In terms of affordable housing, no, we are not tone deaf to that issue. In fact, you know, I think we're cognizant of the fact that there's perhaps no issue that is more important right now to the city, especially over the past year and a half, and that's been done. You know, in terms of affordable housing. So we're taking a measured approach, and we will be working with staff on that. We're very aware of what happened with, you know, at the Broad and Washington project. And so when we look to our total package from a voluntary concessions perspective and hammering out what that commitment's going to be, we understand very well that needs to be a part of it. Let me see. Yeah, I think that's it. Maria, did you want to talk real quick about, you know, our TIA? I know that I think we're requesting a 11.3% reduction in parking from the code minimums right now. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
And did you want to talk about any other transportation aspects real quick?
Yeah, just briefly. Thank you. Again, Maria Lashinger with Grove Slade. We did prepare the traffic impact study. And I think it was mentioned a couple of times tonight about the recent developments that have been approved. So the study does actually take into account the recently approved Founders Row and the Broad and Washington category corner from this property. Both of those have been taken into account in the traffic impact study. And I just want to say, appreciate the comments on the left turn in from Broad Street. It's definitely something that we are evaluating, and the additional pedestrian connections both across Washington and again across Broad. Again, being evaluated in that traffic study, transportation study, looking at all modes and making sure that we're providing good accommodations for all modes of transportation. And
So-
go ahead.
Well, and so Maria, just to clarify that one point, there was that comment about the crossing, at South Washington Street. You're saying that we are looking at that as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We've heard that comment previously, and so that is something that we're looking through.
Okay. And Mr. Crawford from Urban Engineering, I don't know, did you want to speak to anything, or can you speak to anything about, why we're doing the 10-year storm, or should we just take that comment back and look at it further?
Well, it's a good received comment. Typically, the 10-year storm is the storm that's designed for with underground piping systems. The site is designed for the 100-year event, and that is through overland relief. So what basically that means is if a 100-year storm event happens, the assumption is that the entire storm system is clogged and unusable. And so where does the water go? So the site is adequately graded in order to manage the 100-year flow, but the 100-year flow doesn't make it into the city's storm system because the inlets are typically not large enough to be sized for that storm event. So I hope that provides a little bit more clarity. I did hear an ask for a commitment to something beyond the minimum, which we'll certainly take back and consider with the design team.
Okay. So with that, Mr. Chairman, the hour's late. I know you all have more things on your agenda, but we've got several pages of handwritten comments here that I'm going to have to put somehow into a summary to my team, and then I'd also like to have written, as part of our written responses to a lot of these comments as well. So we'll be back before you, and we really appreciate the feedback tonight.
That's great. That's great. No, I thought this was a good presentation, and we hope it was helpful. And we will look forward to seeing it after you go back to council.
Great. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you. All right. Well, moving right along. We're just a little bit behind, about 25 minutes at least on Mr. Stoddard's time estimates. I wonder how he comes up with those estimates, but we're just a little bit behind that. So we'll keep right on trucking here. Now we're going to move to action items. So we're going to, and the first action item is the public information session for the Berman Park trail crossings project. So with that, Paul and Ms. Odognino, I will hand it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I'd like to do is just go ahead and introduce the item briefly, describe what we're doing, the goal for tonight's session, and then turn it over to the lead planner, Ms. Odognino. So tonight, this is billed as a public information session for another CIP project happening within the city. This is something we've been doing more of with recent projects, the idea of taking conceptual level designs for projects to the Planning Commission. As we've talked about a number of times, your authorities under the charter give you some pretty broad sway to weigh in and make recommendations on urban design. You all also have a role in forming the city's CIP and making funding recommendations to the council. So that's the premise tonight. Show you the early concept designs, collect any feedback you have at this early stage, and then try to incorporate those as project development continues. I'm actually going to leave the rest of the storyline and the project description to, as I said, the lead planner. I'll turn it over to Ms. Odognino. Carrie?
Thank you, Paul, and good evening, and thank you to members of the Planning Commission and others here tonight. So there's a staff report and there's also a presentation. I may sort of just jump to the presentation since there's a lot of the same material covered. So again, my name is Carrie Odnino, and I'm a senior planner at the city, and the project manager for the Berman Park Trail Crossings project. Vince Yee from Tool Design Group is also here tonight from the consulting team. He did most of the work putting together the concepts and is available to help answer questions about the project. Next slide. So in terms of project goals, the goals of the Berman Park Trail Crossings project are to improve safety for pedestrians and bicyclists using the trail and continue efforts to better connect the city's park system. The proposed trail crossings will greatly enhance the trail for users traveling through the city and could set a precedent for further improvements trail-wide. Next slide. So as many of you know, Berman Park is a linear park in the center of the city. The park connects commercial properties, residential areas, both single family and multifamily, and is a part of the city's network of green spaces. In 2015, the city adopted the Parks for People plan as the park element of the city's comprehensive plan. That plan recognizes the important role that green corridors like Berman Park play in providing safe pedestrian and bicycle transportation alternatives. The park runs between Nellison Street in the northeast to South Spring Street in the south, and a walking trail traverses the entire park. However, the park is split by several street crossings which lack adequate pedestrian facilities and signage. Next slide. So in terms of scope, the project will update 4 street crossings, including Nellison Street, Kent Street, Irving Street, and South Spring Street. The project charter and grant application called for the crossings to be enhanced with special paving materials to highlight the trail crossings, a narrowed street cross section to shorten the pedestrian crossing distance. The grant application did also call for raised crossings. So in combination, these features will create a safer pedestrian experience by decreasing crossing distances, increasing driver awareness of pedestrian activity, increasing visibility for all users, and decreasing vehicle speeds. Next slide. So looking at the Kenton-Nellison intersection, for option 1, proposed changes to the Kenton-Nellison Street trail crossings include curb extensions and a marked crossing at the mid-block trail crossing at Kent Street. Changes also include a new sidewalk that runs inside the existing curb line along Kent Street. The sidewalk connects trail users to a new stop-controlled intersection at Kent-Nellison Street. And the proposed intersection includes a reduced curb radius on the southwest corner, floating curb extension on the north side of the crossing with parking restrictions in and adjacent to the intersection, and a curb extension with a new curb ramp on the southeast corner. Next slide. So for option 2, proposed changes include curb extensions and a marked crossing at the mid-block trail crossing at Kent Street. Changes also include a new sidewalk to connect trail users to the new stop-controlled intersection at Kent-Nellison. Option 2 also proposes a realignment of Kent Street to intersect with Nellison Street at a perpendicular angle to better improve sightlines and reduce pedestrian crossing distances. The proposed sidewalk along Kent Street follows the curb of the realigned Kent Street, and the proposed intersection includes a reduced curb radius on the southwest corner, floating curb extension on the north side of the crossing with parking restrictions in and adjacent to the intersection, and a curb extension with a new curb ramp on the southeast corner. So this option reduces the asphalt paving at the intersection substantially. City staff is recommending the second option for Kenton Nellison due to more pavement removed from the intersection and the crossings being shorter in length and more perpendicular. Next slide. So for Irving Street, for option 1, the proposed design includes curb extensions on both sides of Irving Street to narrow the gutter-to-gutter width of the street to 22 feet. Parking restriction signs and markings are proposed along the north side of the crossing to ensure the required sight distance. Next slide. For option 2, the proposed design includes a floating curb extension on the north side of Irving Street and marked center island to narrow the travel lanes to 11 feet. Parking restriction signs and markings are proposed on both sides of the crossing to ensure the required sight distance. And of the two options, city staff is recommending option 1. The second option overly relies on pavement markings, does not shorten the crossing distance, and leads to the loss of additional on-street parking. Next slide. So for South Spring Street, for option 1, proposed changes to the Leah Court and South Spring Street intersection include replacing the existing diagonal crossing with a perpendicular crossing and adding a 6-foot refuge island on the north side of the intersection to narrow the travel lanes to 10.5 feet. Both corner radii are reduced to 15 feet, and a curb extension on the north side of Leah Court tightens the gutter-to-gutter width of the street to 22 feet and provides the space required for a new curb ramp. New parking restriction signs are proposed to ensure the proper sight distance. Next slide. So for option 2, proposed changes are the same as option 1, except there's no center median and there's a curb extension to reduce the gutter-gutter width to 22 feet at the crossing. Next slide. So for option 3, proposed changes to the trail crossing include shifting the crossing to be on the south side of the intersection and reducing the curb radii on the southeast corner. The proposed crossing is not perpendicular to vehicular travel due to existing drain inlet locations, but is not as diagonal as the existing crossing. And a 6-foot wide center refuge island helps slow down traffic along South Spring Street. So of the 3 options for Spring Street, option 2 is the city staff recommended option. The medians shown in options 1 and 3 create challenges for snowplows. And then in terms of overall comments regarding design of the crossings so that they feel like more of a linear park, ornamental plantings around the crossing locations could help create more of a park-like feel. Marked crossings could be replaced with stamped concrete or asphalt or raised crossings, so that the painted crosswalks are less costly from a budgetary perspective, but other options are something that could be looked at as we move into development of the 30% plans. So these are actually sort of pre-30% plans and concepts at this point. Next slide. In terms of project timeline, a grant application was first submitted for this project in fall 2017. Preliminary engineering for the project is slated to be completed in January 2022. The project is expected to go to construction in January 2023 and then expected to be completed in July 2023. Next slide. So this slide shows sort of an overview of the project, and I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Odini. Now, Tim's first out of the gate. Go ahead, Mr. Stevens.
Okay, thank you. I'll provide some feedback here as well. This looks to me like it's a very good project. There's certainly an equity component given the location of the fields nearby. I think it's going to make this park more accessible and certainly safer. So I agree with the options on the 3 crossings that that are listed here for the reasons that you give. Refuge islands, it doesn't seem to me that that really is a good idea, not only for the snow plow reasons, but also it just seems to imply that it's okay for cars still to drive by, you know, if a pedestrian is in an island. So I'd rather just see the etiquette being, hey, if there's a pedestrian anywhere close, you stop, you know, you just let the pedestrian go. Wondering if you could look for some opportunities for some stormwater mitigation behind the bump outs, since that's going to be taking out some pavement, maybe creating some opportunity there. Irving Street strikes me as a particularly the dangerous crossing because it's kind of in a V-shaped area and cars kind of come pretty fast down that road. So that one in particular has to be looked at carefully. And if you can manage to get raised crossings in the budget, I think that's great. That would help to signal cars to slow down. So those are my comments, but overall, it's a good project.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. See anybody else? Ms. Comat?
Hi, Carrie. Everybody hear me? Thanks. I just want to second Tim's comment about raised crossings. That I'm curious, Carrie, if you looked at those at all, or if there was a reason why you did not include those among the options. Was it budgetary?
Yes, it was. Yeah, so I think currently in the budget, we had, I think around just over 600K. And then in terms of other opportunities for adding to that budget, we are looking at 30% in local funds from the closeout of other projects. But the raised crossings have sort of escalated costs significantly with other projects. Recently, the WNOD Trail Crossings project, I think it added delay and some cost escalation there, so we weren't sure if we could get it done in the current budget that we have. But we have received comments from, we also went to the Rec and Parks Board and the CACT earlier, and they, well, the Rec and Parks Board did request raised crossings. There were some concerns as well about sort of speeding, and so having that raised would help mitigate that issue as well. Yeah, so.
Thanks. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think, and it would give it a more cohesive feel. I'm really excited about knitting this park together. I walk through there often, and it's a really nice secret park in the middle of the city. One other question I had is, do you have a sense of what the impact is going to be on the number of parking spaces that would be lost, the on-street parking spaces on Ellison? Because I know that's very heavily used by the residents in the fields, I think, and people who go to the buildings there, but I'm assuming that it's probably a mixture of both.
Yeah, I believe it was 10 parking spaces with the first option and 13 with the second one.
And you were recommending the second one, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, so the second one, that's correct.
Okay, yeah, I guess I know if you, I just feel like you might want to give folks some warning if that parking that they rely on is going to be removed, so they can make some alternate arrangements. I'm sure you would get some feedback on that, but I would just encourage you to be transparent with the residents on that change. But I agree. I think it looks great.
Thank you. And we are planning to do a public meeting outdoors, or we're thinking currently for the format in that sort of pavilion area.
Yeah,
Sort of near,
that's a good location.
at the 30% design level, we're planning to do a meeting and do yard signs, and try to get put the signs also, you know, near the other intersections, and sort of notice the meeting so that we can get feedback on the design for the whole project as well. And we're planning to have Spanish translation there, and I think the signs be in both English and Spanish.
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Kama. See anybody else? Not seeing any other hands at the moment. I mean, yeah, overall, I mean, I agree with also with staff's recommendations. Those seem to be the most, you get the most bang for the buck with those types of improvements. And I agree, Berman Park is kind of like, I've ridden my bike through there and walked on there. I mean, but I don't live in that part of the city, but when I remember the first time I even found that it existed, it was, I was like, okay, I didn't even know this was here. The city has a couple places like that are hidden back there, like Roberts Park and a couple other little places. I mean, Berman is neat because of the trail and, you know, so, but yeah, so any upgrades, I mean, the improved crossings also make the park more visible. People who drive through on those, some of the cross streets, don't always even realize what it is or where it goes. I don't know if signage is part of it. There's no sign. I mean, technically, I don't know if like the portion between Spring and Irving is technically Berman Park. There's no signage over there that says Berman Park. There's a little trail and you can tell it's a park, but I don't know of any kind of signage to help people know, okay, if I get on this trail, I know Berman Park because I know that I've seen the sign for it over, you know, by Nellison, so it'll get me there. I don't know. I mean, not that it's that long, but I've always, you know, the first time I went on it, I didn't know where I was going to wind up. I figured I couldn't get too lost, but, you know, so if any kind of signage could be provided where there's no signage, it also helps to give the park identity, and people who drive by or walk by, you know, this raises the profile of it in people's minds, you know, so just an idea.
Yeah, I know that first part of the park is the Boy Scout Association property, and there's an easement running through there. So I don't know if that was sort of like maybe they tried to get a sign in, but it's technically sort of Boy Scouts property.
Okay, well that would explain it then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to mention you guys are showing it green on here, but there's a whole chunk of property right on Spring that is not part of the park. And the Boy Scouts actually have a sign saying it's not part of the park, actually.
Well, I guess that's why there's no sign. Answers my question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they mind if people come on it or anything like that, but they do have a sign.
Yeah, well, if there's an easement, I guess maybe the public is allowed to use it, but I don't know what the terms of the easement are, you know, what the story is with that. But anyway, but okay, well, but overall, yeah, I think staff's recommendations are good, and Ms. Coleman's recommendation to reach out to, you know, to the folks in the apartments there on Nellison, on the Falls apartments, and I think is good. It will be, you know, because they probably use it the most. I mean, you know, obviously when you live in an apartment, having outdoor green space is so important, and those folks will probably, I would guess they use it, you know, more than other folks, but maybe not. But still, it's obviously important to them. So any outreach you can do would be good. Okay, if there's no other comments from folks. Now, technically, this was just a public information session, Paul. It's not there's no formal action we need to take, right? This is just feedback.
Yeah, so obviously the feedback is welcome, and then I might just ask, Ms. Maysboard, did we receive any public comment on this one?
We did not.
Okay. We did have it listed as an action item. I think Mr. Chair, on the last couple of these information sessions we've held, the Planning Commission has selected someone to pen comments. If you all want to do that, of course, that's your option with the way it's listed on the agenda. but obviously staff has heard your feedback tonight, and we're happy to incorporate it, whether there's a formal letter or not. Okay. Right. I do. I think we'll let our comments, our verbal comments today, I think, serve as our comments. So, all right. Well, with that, then we'll move right along, given the time here, and we'll move on to the next items, which these should be quick. Approval of minutes, March 17th and April 7th. I guess we'll have to consider each one separately. So we'll start with March 17th. Were there any comments, revisions, edits from anybody to the March 17th minutes? I am not hearing or seeing any hands go up or hearing anybody. I spoke too soon. Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, just going to say move to adopt.
All right. Motion. We get a second. Second by Mr. Puentes. Discussion. All right. Roll call vote. Ms. Bazemore, please.
Mr. Krasner?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Puntas?
Yes.
Ms. Weiss?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. The next one, April 7th, 2021. Doesn't seem so long ago. Same thing. Stevens? Mr. Stevens, you're.
Yeah, I do have a substantive comment on this one. At line 75. It says that NGBS could be utilized here. That should be NGBS should not be utilized.
I will fix that.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was a long meeting, so there was this was a lengthy set of minutes. There was a lot of comments provided on that one. Okay, anything else? Anybody else? If not, we'll look for a motion to adopt these minutes.
I move that we adopt as amended.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, roll call vote.
All right, Mr. Krasner?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Puntas?
Abstain.
Ms. Weiss?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Okay, thanks everybody. Moving right along to item 8, our information items. Again, we'll try to keep these brief. Planning commissioners reports. Anyone has anything they'd like to share? All right.
I have one.
Go ahead.
I didn't find my hand fast enough.
That's all right, Ms. Coleman.
I attended the Housing Commission meeting last week. They are looking for us to make a nominee. I think I shared the information with you for.
That's right.
For an affordable housing committee. So I just want to make sure that that is discussed. I think this committee would be formed anytime there was an applicant for the Affordable Housing Fund, and one member of the Planning Commission would serve on this committee. So one who would be nominated by the chair. And they were also looking for ideas. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I remember you emailed me about that, and I recall, right? And then Dana Lewis responded that, I guess by statute, or I don't know, it's that this committee requires somebody from the Planning Commission to serve on it. Right.
Yeah. And then the other thing, Dana was looking for ideas on how to spend some of the Amazon money. I think this is future tranches. My kids were being really loud, so I missed part of this discussion, and Dana didn't get back to me on this question. So there was some discussion about redeveloping the city-owned land where the Falls Church Homeless Shelter is located to perhaps include probably a nicer shelter, maybe with single room occupancy as well as transitional housing. So that was one idea, but they are actively looking to gather ideas now for that potential future money, I believe.
Okay.
And that's it.
Great. Just to respond to the request about the Affordable Housing Committee,
I guess if I'm required to appoint somebody, we don't have to decide tonight, but if anyone is interested in serving on that, it sounds like they meet ad hoc as necessary. I guess reach out to me, send me an email offline, and we can see if there's more, what the interest is and who would like to do that, and who has the time and so forth, and we'll go from there. Okay, Ms. Teets.
Yeah, so I attended CACT last week, and they also looked at the Berman Park Trail Crossings project, and they were appreciative of anything that makes it more pedestrian friendly, obviously. The big discussion they had were on the sidewalk program. They're continuing to look at ways we could get more sidewalks into our neighborhoods and better sidewalks. And also they talked a lot about racial and socioeconomic equity, in transportation. So they are just kind of looking for ways to make transportation work better for everyone. So that's it.
Okay, very good. Let's see here. Ms. Weiss.
Yes, I attended the Environmental Sustainability Council meeting last Thursday. And I guess two items of note. One, they had a discussion on equity in response to the city council's referral to boards and commissions to consider equity. They heard from a member of the Library Commission, which is doing something called the 21-Day Racial Equity Habit Building Challenge, which is a program developed by the American Bar. It has nothing to do with libraries or Environmental Sustainability Council in particular, but it's just a way for all of the different members to educate themselves on racial equity. And so the ESC decided to do that in addition to the Library Council. So I wanted to share that as something that we might consider in our subsequent conversation. The other thing was there was some discussion of development projects and the ESC and other boards and commissions being asked to participate early in the process. And I think overall the members of the ESC were, embraced the opportunity to come in early, recognizing that, they can't formalize an ESC specific position, but that it's a good opportunity. There was some concern, I think, by staff that maybe it was too early, but I think the members were on board with it. So the ESC is identifying one member who will tag one particular development and just stay on top of it over time. So hopefully that will help develop the connection and provide sort of continuity of feedback between the ESC and the Planning Commission and City Council on the projects.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I'm not seeing anyone else. And again, I want to keep moving here because we're short on time. Now, Paul, for correspondence, I think the Founders Row 2 comments are self-explanatory. People can read those. We were there. If you weren't there, you can watch it and read it. And we'll see that again. The City Council Work Plan and Equity Review, I guess that's something that's going to be obviously coming back to us, later in May to work on, because I know they're looking for us to respond in May. And so, I mean, is there anything we need to, we're not doing anything with this tonight, right? But in May, do you have it on the agenda for a meeting in May to deal with this?
That's correct. So, I'll say that I appreciate the reminder from Commissioner Weiss to actually put this on the Commission's agenda. Thank you for that. So I can talk about this in the director's report, but this is on your agenda for the May meetings.
Okay. Right. Exactly. So I guess I would encourage everyone to read it, and they're asking for us to. Take an equity lens to everything we do, which is, obviously a worthwhile endeavor, and we should, think about that topic with respect to, our responsibilities and duties in the city, which certainly are very much applicable to an equity discussion. And we'll have a deeper dive into that in May. So I guess that's a good segue, Paul, for you to give us a very, very brief director's report. And then we'll go into our work session items.
Absolutely. The director's report, I'm actually just going to focus on the look ahead for for the next activities, the scheduled activities in the May meetings. So on the agenda still for tonight are work sessions on 2 land use applications. One is a special use permit at 128 South Spring to permit a daycare in a residentially zoned area. And then the other is a combination of a lot line adjustment as well as a subdivision for 222 West Greenway, and I think the other address is 221 West Cameron. And then so that'll be action on those 2 items. And then, or that's the staff recommendation. And then the other is this work session on work plan and equity. And, just to throw out, on the value of Planning Commission looking at its social equity, it's interesting that, social equity is one of the things that really got city planning started in the U.S., back at the turn of sort of the Industrial Revolution and really places across the country urbanizing. And one of the key tenets was actually access to safe and affordable housing. Right, if anybody remembers the tenement houses, right, this effort to sort of, figure out how to cram enough people in to run the factories day and night. And really it was urban planners who sort of led some of those early charges to make sure people had safe places to live. So, some of those challenges still exist today. Is there enough safe and, fairly priced housing for people to have access to? And then, of course, other challenges as well. The fact that the climate's not going to be the same tomorrow as it is today. And how can the City of Falls Church prepare itself for that change and perhaps even mitigate some of the changes? So that's May 5th. And then May 19th, we've got a speaker series lined up. Planner with Arlington County, Eileen Winquist, who helps plan their stormwater and environmental planning activities there in the county. For folks who don't know, Arlington recently kicked off an effort to do a lot of green infrastructure planning in the city, actually green infrastructure implementation. I had the opportunity to talk with Ms. Winquist years ago when I was in graduate school. So I reached out to her again, and she offered to come talk to the Planning Commission about what Arlington County is doing green infrastructure. And then back for action will be the lot line adjustment for the West Falls Church project that the commission had previously discussed. This is coming, I think, back on the agenda now that we have all the required signatures on the application materials. And then action pending some sort of letter or comments back to City Council on the equity question that they had posed. But that wraps up my report, unless there are any questions.
Okay. Mr. Coleman has a question.
Sorry, just a quick one. Paul, I saw on the agenda it said update on the WNOD trail crossings. Is there a brief update, or did Carrie cover that?
We didn't have the materials in time to get them distributed by our usual package distribution. So we've moved that internally, but we didn't include it here in the look ahead. We've moved that to the May 5th meeting. But it's an opportunity to look at the 90% designs.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stoddard. All right, so we'll keep on trucking here, and now we're gonna move into our work session portion. And Mr. Stoddard just mentioned the 2 items. I believe the first one up is 222 West Greenway subdivision, along with the 221 West Cameron, since both lots or both addresses are involved in the application. And we'll start off with a staff presentation.
Yeah, let me go ahead and briefly introduce the item before I hand it over to the case planner, Jeff Hollern. So this is before the commission for work session tonight. Staff is recommending that you schedule it for public hearing and action at your next meeting, May 5th. Jeff will explain that. I'm sorry, Mr. Hollern will explain this in the staff report, but it's an application that involves 2 properties: 222 West Greenway, 221 West Cameron. It looks complicated, but actually the mechanics involved are fairly sort of straightforward if you start from the beginning and get yourself to the end. There's a lot line adjustment in order to make some acreages work, and then a subdivision in order to reorient the lots. I don't want to steal too much of the thunder, but the idea is that today there are some non-conforming lots of record at 222 West Greenway. And the idea is to accommodate those lots and bring them up to standard with the zoning ordinance by this combination of the lot line adjustment and the subdivision. I may have actually just stolen the punchline in Jeff's report, but I'll turn it over to him anyway. So turn it over to the case planner, Mr. Hollern.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Hollern with the planning staff. Planning Commission has requested to hold a work session to review the first submission of preliminary and final plats for the proposed subdivision at 222 West Greenway Boulevard and a lot line adjustment between that parcel and 221 West Cameron Road. This work session is intended to inform the Planning Commission of the application and to provide the Commission an opportunity to offer feedback in advance of the recommended public hearing tentatively scheduled for May 5th. The staff comments were generally routine. Staff provided one substantive comment to require construction of a sidewalk along the frontage of the property, which is across from TJ Elementary School. But the applicant is proposing a tear down of an existing single-family house to construct two single-family houses. The subject property at 222 West Greenway Boulevard includes two underlying lots of record. However, the lots as recorded are substandard for lot area and frontage. Therefore, the applicant has also filed for a lot line adjustment to incorporate excess land area from a neighboring third lot to meet lot area requirements, and a subdivision to reorient the lots to meet frontage requirements. Just a little bit about the parcel itself. 222 West Greenway Boulevard is under ownership by Michael L. Britton. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Its existing structures on the property consist of a 1.5-story frame house with detached garage, which will be knocked down after the subdivision. There is one curb cut for a driveway on the north side of the parcel along West Cameron Road. The lot line adjustment includes the transfer of 504 square feet from 221 West Cameron Road to the 222 West Greenway Boulevard parcel. The intended development for single-family dwellings is consistent with the comprehensive plan. As I mentioned before, staff reviewed the first submission of the preliminary and final plats and determined that with the approval of the lot line adjustment, they are in conformance with the requirements and preparation of the plats required in Chapter 38 subdivisions. Staff provided one substantive comment, as I mentioned before, to require the construction of a sidewalk along the frontage of the property due to the site's proximity to Thomas Jefferson Elementary School. As this staff report was being written, we had not yet received Public Works comments. I can say now that Public Works comments was pretty simple and straightforward. They just wanted to see where future curb cuts would be in the new subdivision. Other than that, they did not have any other comments to share. All of the comments are listed in the staff report if you wish to read through them, but as I've already pointed out a couple of times, the big comment is the sidewalk across from the school. We are recommending a May 5th public hearing and action on this item. And I do have a couple of sort of updates to this staff report as well. One thing is that I had mentioned that the comments were sent to the applicant at the end of last week. We did not hear back from Public Works until this week. So the date, I guess, is wrong as far as when comments were transmitted to the applicant, which I think was could have been as late as yesterday. And also, we have referred the naming of the subdivision to the Historical Commission, who's looking into it now. They have about a 10-day window to get back to us on naming of the subdivision. But I guess I did receive an email today from the chair, Ron Anzalone, that there is there's not much history to look up on this particular plot. So if the applicant or if the Planning Commission has any suggestions, all are welcome. With that, I do see that we have Antoinette Isherwood and we have the applicant on the call as well if they'd like to talk about the project.
Hi, this is Antoinette Isherwood. Thank you, Mr. Holleran. I don't think we have much to add. That was a great summary. One thing I do want to note is that, this stemmed from the existing lot does have two, as mentioned, two undersized lots on it. And so, we were originally looking at doing a two-family dwelling on the property. And so in the interest of constructing two separate single-family homes instead of a two-family dwelling, that's where the effort came to obtain the 500 additional square feet from the adjacent property to have a better configuration of the properties. And so I think other than that, we are here to answer questions.
Hi, this is Michael here.
Somebody talking. I see somebody's talking, but the volume is very low. Is that Mr. Al Britton has his hand up?
Yeah, Michael Albritton. It looks like you might be muted.
I'm muted.
Oh, it's very light.
Again, I can't hear him if he's talking. Maybe he can reconnect and we can see. In the meantime, does any of the commissioners have any questions for Ms. Isherwood?
Just quickly, oh, I'm sorry.
I saw, okay, Mr. Puentes, go ahead.
Just move the sidewalk, I think, is a good idea. Are there other, it wasn't clear to me from the staff report, are there other sidewalks on adjacent properties? I know that it says on I forget which one, Greenway, I think it doesn't exist.
Yes, so we took a look, as Mr. Holleran mentioned, we did get the comments a little later, so we had taken a brief look at it. So there isn't sidewalk currently along the Greenway, or I'm sorry, along the West Cameron side of the street. So that southwest side of the street, heading towards the school. There is a sidewalk along Greenway Boulevard along our frontage. And one thing I had wanted to discuss with staff further and want us to look at a little further before we come back to the Planning Commission on May 5th is that we are trying to save that tree on the corner of Greenway and West Cameron. So construction of a sidewalk would impact that tree that we're trying to save. And then coming across the West Cameron Road frontage, it would not have a sidewalk to tie into. I know, the thought was to potentially connect to be able to have a crossing to tie into the sidewalk across West Cameron and towards Sharrow. But in terms of purposes for the school, I was trying to figure out the logistics of where that sidewalk would lead. I guess my thinking was that as you're coming along Greenway Boulevard, you would cross Cameron at that intersection versus going right. And then if you're coming from West Cameron, you'd be on the other side of the street on the existing sidewalk.
And Ms. Isherwood, not to I hate to interrupt, but just to be clear, the plan is incorrect. It's not West Cameron on the north, it's Seton Lane.
Yes. So we, yeah, sorry. So I did look into that. I actually asked our surveyor the exact same question. So in the City of Falls Church land records, it's called West Cameron Road, and we had an older plat and it was called West Cameron Road. I do know on Google Maps and the actual street sign shows it as Seton Lane. And I was informed that some of the other record information was something that we had decided to go by rather than the Google information.
Yeah, well, I mean, the city should, Paul and staff should, Mr. Holland, you guys should figure that out. We should know what our streets are. So
yeah, so I don't, right. So and then I think there's like a parcel across Cameron that's addressed West Cameron Road. There's like a parcel on the school property that is addressed West Cameron Road. So we did not look into the history of how the Google street.
Well, It's
and
signed
the
as
street
Seton,
sign.
so, I mean, for the purposes of discussion, I mean, it's signed as Seton, and even to the point where, you know, yeah, I pulled up Google too while you were talking, and at the corner of Seton and Cameron, it actually has, like, you know, the street sign with the arrow indicating Seton begins there and follows that, you know, adjacent to the school. So staff and, you know, we should know what our streets are called officially. So let's sort that out and tell this applicant how the plat should be labeled. It shouldn't be a subjective thing. It should be, we should know. So let's sort it out if it's confusing. Because just for the discussion's sake, if you're mentioning a tree at the corner of, you know, West Cameron and Greenway, some people might say, well, those two streets don't intersect. So let's try to sort that out. Mr. Stevens, you had your hand up.
Yeah, maybe you could help. I'm kind of confused here. Maybe you could clear it up. The address is 222 West Greenway Boulevard, but it looks like from the two subdivided lots that it's oriented towards, well, either West Cameron or Seton, whichever it is. So I'm just trying to figure out, has there been a change in orientation here versus where the current house is, or maybe I'm just confused?
Yes, our proposal is to reorient the lots. So the existing lot lines do run east to west along West Greenway. So the existing house faces West Greenway. And so we are trying to get 500 square feet from the adjacent property at 221 West Cameron Road, and also doing that lot line adjustment that Mr. Holland mentioned to rotate them.
So it will face either West Cameron or Seton, whatever that turns out to be. Will it be a change in address then from what exists?
So I think the corner lot is, we're looking at having that continue to face Greenway Boulevard.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I still hear like a faint voice from the applicant, but I can't hear him. So again, apologies for that, but I just can't hear him. I see his hand is still raised, but I don't hear really any audible audio. I hear like some feedback. So, all right, there are no other comments from commissioners. I mean, it's a work session. I mean, just to sum up, I mean, I agree that anytime we can get a sidewalk section, especially across from an elementary school where people are, you know, where there's so much pedestrian traffic, so many children walk to TJ. I mean, you know, I hate the argument of like, well, it doesn't connect and this. I mean, that's the attitude we've taken historically, and it doesn't really get us in a good place. So you know, given where this is located, the fact that it provides a pedestrian refuge across, I mean, there are times when TJ lets out and there are just kids scattered all throughout that area. And even if it's only one block of sidewalk across from the existing sidewalk on the other side of, I'll call it Seton or whatever we're going to call it, I think it's worthwhile. And I think there's an advantage there. And I think that advantage is more important than that tree. You know, the tree on the corner, honestly, it's looks like an oak. It's, you know, it's not particularly that special. And I mean, I'm sure there are tree people that might disagree with me, but I don't think the tree is worth it. I think the sidewalk is more important than that tree that's maybe a 25, 30-year-old tree. It's not, doesn't look anything so spectacular. So, I mean, that's my 2 cents. I would not support any modification or waiver of any sidewalk requirements in that location. Ms. Weiss, your hand popped up.
Yeah, sorry, it's a little bit belated on the uptake here. I also support a sidewalk there as somebody who walks there frequently and has kids walking there frequently. So I do think it would be helpful, particularly given that intersection is a little wonky, although there are some good stop signs there. I had a question for staff. I noticed that in the timing, so that was my one comment on the plat at this point in time. But the timing in the staff memo is that the notices are to be sent out on the 23rd. And I recall a conversation we had a few months ago where staff was reflecting on the need to engage neighbors sooner and had developed some approaches to notifying neighbors earlier than the current process. I'm just wondering where that stands in the context of this particular case.
So I'm still following right now. I'm still just following the typical noticing procedures that we've done, which is 10 days before the public hearing. I don't know if we ever really settled exactly how early we wanted to get noticing out. I do think that we did decide during that meeting, if I remember correctly, that putting signage out in addition to the notices was also something that we thought would help. So that will be part of this as well, putting a sign up on the property. But I understand that we did say that it would probably be more helpful, right, to get it even before the work session. But I think I myself and other staff members are still doing the required 10-day notice.
Just to follow up on that, as I recall, the conversation was staff asking for planning commission feedback. There wasn't like a formal planning commission decision. So I would encourage bringing that back as a formal decision so we can just align on what the current, what a new approach might be.
Sure,
Yeah,
I can do that.
Yeah, if I could just interject, I think you're right, Commissioner, that the direction from the commission was to include noticing in advance of the work session through a yard sign, sort of either on or near the property. And I think I think you're right that staff should be looking to do that. If the commission wanted to pursue that formally, I think you could do that through an amendment to your rules of procedure. I think one of the things that we probably need to do on staff is just sort of get ourselves prepared to actually do that. Usually when these applications come in, we like to get them around on a pretty quick turnaround. They are considered, I think, routine applications. As far as you can get a routine land development application. So I think probably what we need to do is just on our side is actually order some of these signs in advance so that we're ready when the applications show up versus trying to chase after it after we've already got the application in hand.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Stoddard. So this will be, I guess, scheduled for hearing on the 5th of May. If there are no other questions or comments from commissioners, it's a fairly straightforward type of, as compared to some other subdivisions we've seen. And luckily, also we hear a lot about stormwater on some of these. I mean, this one, they're luckily draining towards the trips run and towards the school, as opposed to immediately, to their immediate neighbors, which also I think helps as far as the community goes. I'll still encourage the applicant to utilize, whatever they can do for stormwater. They have to meet the minimum requirements, but whatever they can do to be innovative certainly would be appreciated as well, even though I realize this is the subdivision phase, not the grading plan. If there's no other comments on that, I guess we'll move on because we're quickly running out of time here. We'll get to our last item, which is the work session for the special use permit. So this is a work session on a recommendation to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a daycare use at 128 South Spring. We were just talking about the Scout House, very timely, because here we are talking about the Scout House, which I will say, I never knew the history of that building. The website for the Scout House has a pretty good little history on their website of the history of the Scout House, going all the way back to the original owners, hundreds of years ago of the land. It was pretty interesting. So anyhow, that's kind of my introduction. But Paul, the application has some issues, I think. Why don't you give us an overview, and we'll briefly discuss it here.
Sure. Let me briefly introduce the item. Before I turn it over to the case planner on this one. So this is a work session for the Planning Commission tonight, and as you said, it is the applicant has applied for what's called a special use permit to run a daycare facility on a property with an R1A zone. special use permits aren't all that common in the city of Falls Church. They are a provision of the city's zoning ordinance that allows for uses that would generally be consistent with what are the by right uses. Right in R1A, usually that's single family housing. So the special use permit is a way to allow for uses that would be consistent, generally consistent, but provides for a mechanism to review any impacts those uses might have on surrounding or neighboring properties. And through that process, the BZA, the Board of Zoning Appeals, could set conditions for that specific use. So the Planning Commission's role in this application is to review the recommendation for consistency with the comprehensive plan, potential impacts on neighboring properties, and make a recommendation to the Board of Zoning Appeals. It's the Board of Zoning Appeals, the BZA, that has the final decision on whether to grant or deny the special use permit and whether any conditions are appropriate along with that action. The schedule is the same as the item that was previously on the agenda, to hold a work session tonight and then to make a recommendation as your final action at the next meeting in May. I think it's May 5th. But with that, I'll turn it over for the report to Mr. Cameron Garris. But actually, before I do that, Mr. Chair, we're coming up on that 10:30 deadline.
That's right.
I assume you've got an eye on it, since that is the Brent Krasner provision.
It is. I take that provision very seriously now, especially.
I know you do.
Well, I mean, there's some issues on this one, so reluctantly, I think we're going to need at least a few more minutes to chat about it, even though, again, ultimately, this is just a recommendation to the BZA. I mean, we'll start off with maybe 15 additional minutes. If folks would indulge, so that would take us to 10:45. So let's start with that. Keep people efficient here. Can I get a motion to have us go to 10:45?
I move that we go to 10:45.
Second.
Thanks. We need a roll call on that, Ms. Bazemore.
Yes. Mr. Krasner?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Puentes?
Yes.
Ms. Weiss?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
All right. We got some. We got a little bit of time, Paul. Let's be efficient.
All right, I'll turn it over. Mr. Garris.
All right, thank you for the additional minutes. I'll be brief. The staff report, the application before you is in regards to allowance of a special use permit for 128 South Spring to operate as a daycare facility within R1A low density residential zoning. Staff is generally supportive of the application, given the importance of daycare providing childcare opportunities. As you said, this will be recommendation to Board of Zoning Appeals. Staff recommends that the applicant provide a parking and pickup drop-off plan to accommodate the expected number of teachers and students without negatively impacting surrounding properties. The applicant seeks to operate a daycare service, the Nature Academy, within the property's existing structure known as the Scout House. The applicant has requested approval to serve up to 49 children from 6 months of age to elementary school age. For elementary age children, the program may offer before and after school care. The hours of operation may fluctuate depending on program needs and demands. The applicant expects to begin service within shorter hours, 8 to 9 to 12 to 2, adjusting when needed, possibly going to later hours of 7 to 5. The applicant has asked me to clarify that she intends to begin the program with 25 children and add more depending on the program's and community's needs. Going to some background, the lot is about 1 acre, includes 1 building, the Scout House, and a gravel parking lot. According to the applicant, the previous use was 16 years as a childcare service called On the Right Track, until 2003, which provided programming for 20 to 25 children. The site is adjacent to Berman Park, easy access to outdoor benches, tables, playgrounds, picnic areas. It is within a R1A low-density residential area surrounding houses. The south edge of the property borders an asphalt trail which connects South Spring to Irving Street, providing entrance into Berman Park. There's also an 11-minute walk from Thomas Jefferson Elementary. Going to staff analysis, according to code, the proposed daycare is in a conditional use permitted by a special unit permit in the R1A low-density residential district. Based on a staff evaluation of the site and adjacent uses, and with regard to considerations for approval of the special use permit, staff finds the proposed use would be a proper use for the property. Staff is seeking additional information from the applicant regarding the transportation parking plan for teachers, as well as pickup drop-off for students. There are 12 existing unmarked parking spaces in the gravel lot, as well as 2 handicap spaces for parents and staff members. According to code, daycare and kindergartens must provide 1 parking space per 125 square feet of area plus 2 for employees. This would have a total of 16 parking spaces required for the site. Comprehensive plan goes into further justification for the proposal. Chapter 4, future land use and economic development, reiterates the suitability of daycare facility within R1A zoning by outlining the character and needs of low density residential districts. In summary, the proposed daycare operated out of the Scout House aesthetically blends into the surrounding low density neighborhood. In addition to preservation of character, the daycare will serve to fulfill a need by providing additional childcare options for families while providing excellent green space and connection to nearby Berman Park. There's been 4 letters of support from surrounding neighbors regarding the proposed plan. In regards to timing, this would be going to recommendation for Plan Commission May 5th, and then May 13th would be a BZA action. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Applicant Ms. Wills is also on the call.
All right, start off with Ms. Teets.
Yeah, I think my only question is, I don't know if there's some kind of state standard for the amount of square feet per child, but I've used the Scout House multiple times for events for Girl Scouts where I've had 20, 25 brownies or daisies in there with my girls to do an event. And I'm not sure that 49 kids can really fit in that building. I understand that they expect to use the outdoor space a lot and they're only going to go up to 25, but I just kind of wonder if we should look at it being a limit a little bit smaller than 49, because I just don't think the space is adequate for 49 kids to be in there and be active. It's just not that big of a room. And the kitchen's very small, and then there's a very small bathroom and a very small, like, little kind of like a corridor to go out the back, and that's about it. I mean, it's anyway, that's my only question is I'm not sure that 49, up to 49 is a good number. Maybe more like up to 40 or up to 35 would be better. But if there is some kind of standard, that would be great.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Teets. Any other comments from anybody on this one? Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering, Mr. Garris, if you know, were there any complaints under the previous use of childcare at this location when it was in operation? Complaints from the neighbors?
Not that I know of or have found in research. I can look more into that to find out if there have been, but not to my knowledge.
Yeah, it might be good to know. Also, it's good that the applicant included letters of support, but I noticed that they were all from across the street and didn't see anything from the 2 houses that are actually right next to the Scout building on either side. So I'm just wondering if I don't know if it's appropriate to reach out to those people, but hopefully at least they know that it's being considered and take advantage of whatever opportunities there are to express any thoughts or opinions that they might have.
I think I could point out that it's constantly under use in the evenings on the weekend by various scout troops, both Girl, Boy Scouts, even some Hungarian Scouts meet there sometimes. So I think they'd be pretty unaware not to know that place is full of kids a lot.
Okay, and I do agree that maybe some limit, below 49 seems to make sense just, at this point. Thanks.
Let's see, Ms. Weiss.
Yeah, as a semi-neighbor, I live just a few blocks away. I think there's, but not on that exact block. So I would like to hear from those folks. So I would say that, there's sort of been a we're accustomed to having daycare there. And because the note in the staff report that said it operated through 2003 was incorrect. I know they were at least offering aftercare much more recently than that, because one of my kids went there just a few years ago. So it's been in much more recent operation than indicated in this memo. So just a couple comments. So it would be good to have some sort of neighbor engagement if that's possible beyond a few letters. So I don't know if there's some sort of community forum or, you know, event that's planned. My second question on the number of kids, I'm just interested in understanding how many kids were in the daycare previously, sort of the daycare, not the aftercare function. And then I had a question on the parking. I guess one is, you know, would they even be able to expand the parking given the easement from Northern Virginia Conservation Trust? 1, 2, I don't know that, again, I would want to understand the neighbors, but I think from the perspective of traffic calming on Spring Street, and understanding that it's drop off and pickup, I don't know why we would need to expand parking, given that there is on-site parking or a street parking right there in a way that might even sort of help slow some of the speeding that can occur during that particular time of day. So anyways, my inclination is to not request additional parking, to go with what we have, unless there's good reasons, you know, to expand parking.
Thank you, Ms. Weiss. Yeah, I had a bunch of questions on this one. Paul and I chatted a little bit about it, you know, before, but first of all, Mr. Holland, you identified that they're short on parking right now. You identified they need 16, they only have 12. How do you know they have 12? I mean, it's unmarked, it's unstriped, it's gravel. There are a few curb, you know, blocks. Do they really even have 12? How did you come to that number?
I mean, estimate in terms of standard parking size, that 10 or 12 spaces would be able to fit.
For city standards, you know, with appropriate aisle widths, I mean, the city has a standard for how big parking spaces have to be, how they have to be situated. I mean, I don't know if we have even 12, which again speaks to the fact that if they can't meet the minimum required parking, then that's a problem, right? I mean, you can't just ignore that, right? If you can't meet the minimum. So I think they need to look very carefully at that. I mean, normally also I would think that, I don't know, I asked Mr. Stoddard about this, when there's an application for a special use permit, isn't there typically a requirement? I haven't looked at the city ordinance. I didn't have a chance to do that before today, the submission requirements. Isn't there typically a drawing that's required, plat, a special permit plat, some type of graphic that, again, would look at the parking, you know, a zoning table, something that would show that they can meet what's required? Because that to me is probably the biggest issue here. I mean, the numbers will drive the parking requirement. But you know, again, then someone mentioned, you know, the state requirements. The state regulates childcare, and they have a formula for how many staff are required based on the number of kids and the ages of those kids. And so, yeah, I don't think there's any way that 49 children, especially younger children, could ever work here, because then all of a sudden you might find that they're required to have like 8 or 10 or 12 staff. And so I just don't see how something at that level could work. But I'm hesitant to support anything until I know, and granted, we're just making a recommendation to the PZA, but you know, until I know exactly how much parking they have under the city's ordinance, what they could actually park here on site, unless they're trying to get some type of waiver from that. I don't know what the process is to get a parking reduction, but to me that's an issue, you know. And I think the traffic, because you know, you're granted it's been a scout house for, you know, generations, but you know, having it used during AM PM peak, you know, Spring Street gets a fair bit of traffic because it goes out to the signal. You know, I just think that's the most relevant issue here, you know. And so I think those questions are just really there's no real answers in here. I think the application is very vague. I think the statement from the applicant is very general and vague. It provides no details. I mean, I would just want the BZA to approve a list of operating conditions, development conditions that are very detailed and lay out exactly the hours, the numbers, all of that. And based on the information that's been provided, it just seems all very vague to me. And so, my own personal view is that I wouldn't be at this point willing to support anything here because I don't know enough about, what can be accommodated in the building and on the site. So, that's where I'm at on it. So I don't know, other folks may feel differently, but I just feel that without a drawing, without something that's really shows what, how it will operate, I just think, we're setting up a situation that could really cause a detriment to the neighbors there, just because it's adding a much more intense use that operates, every day, 5 days a week, and has pickup and drop off during AM and PM peak. So I don't want to belabor it. We're going to run out of time soon, but that's kind of where I'm at. So if we're looking to vote to make a recommendation on May 5th, I'd want to see a lot more information on those issues to make sure it can actually meet the zoning ordinance to operate there based on the numbers they're looking to have. So that's kind of where I'm at, and we can see what can be done in the interim. But if it's not ready to go on the 5th, we should talk about it. I mean, and again, it's just a recommendation from us, but that's my view.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I think, right, obviously the conversation here, I think you're right to raise questions about the mechanics of how this is going to operate. And that is something that we've highlighted in the staff recommendation. Just going back to sort of the purpose of the application, right, is to try and stand up a daycare. And I think, childcare is one of those things that remains important, and, financially it remains out of reach for a lot of families in the area. So I think the more daycare options that can be provided in the city is, certainly helpful. I wonder if the applicant is on, I wonder if talking a little bit, now about sort of, the latest thinking in terms of, the programming for this, the ages of the students, the hours of operation, what the thinking is in terms of how, what service is going to be provided and how it would operate. And I apologize, my Teams interface is spotty again, so I can't tell who's on the call and who's not.
Miss Wills, are you on the call?
Yes, I am.
Oh.
I do have a few things to add, and you were asking about the house to the right. That's 126 South Spring Street. That house seems vacant. So no, that's the joint house. Actually, the house next to the Scout house. So I wasn't able to provide any letter of support. The house is on the. That was the house on the right side of the Scout house. On the left side, there are no houses, as well as in the back of the Scout house. And the big gravel area really provides a lot of parking spaces. You are saying that maybe they are not there 10 or 12. I can guarantee to you that there are at least 12 parking spaces there. However, cars will not be parked there. It's a pick-up and drop-off location, as well as maybe shortly on South Spring Street. Also, the Scout house has a back entrance and front entrance. So that way, if they are coming and using path from Irving Street, it actually eliminates traffic congestion, and kids are not coming all at the same time. Also, we are located only 10 minutes from Thomas Jefferson Elementary School. And the reason to request maximum occupancy is actually if you are considering parents maybe that they will be coming with a stroller. So, they will be staying with children for 1 or 2 hours, also staff. And I was thinking also if I have before and after school care, maybe just for 1 or 2 hours for older children that they can use the nature program that we will provide there. So the really maximum occupancy is 49, and some of you mentioned actually that childcare office, Virginia childcare office will give also their final decision. I was advised by them to request the maximum occupancy, and I was told that's 49. I do understand that number could be, approved for less children, and but that's what I got the recommendation from them to request maximum occupancy, and that was 49. I do not think, to impact the neighborhood with any additional parking or traffic, because I think that I will have, by the age of children, different program. So that way we will not, all children will not be coming at the same time. But I would like to provide for them to come with the parents or caregivers, and that will actually change the occupancy at a certain time of the program that I will provide there.
Okay, now I appreciate all of that. And I would just say that, again, I understand that arrivals and departures may be staggered, but you still have to meet, the city has a zoning ordinance that requires a certain amount of parking be provided on the site. You can't count the spaces on Spring Street. And so, you need to demonstrate that you can meet the city's requirements in order to have that number. And so, based, and the city ordinance seems to be based on the square footage that's devoted to that use. So that's something that staff will have to work with you on to see what you can fit and meet the ordinance. But I hear what you're saying, and that may be mitigating factors as far as what you're saying. I think, again, the concern I have is, we don't want to cause a detriment as much as childcare is certainly needed and a worthy endeavor. We don't want to cause a detriment or impair the property value of, some of the immediately surrounding homes who, by introducing a use that can't be properly accommodated on the site. Not all uses can be accommodated at all intensities on all sites. So just a matter of finding the right fit. And there's probably some number that can work here, but we need to find out what that is. And that was the main thrust of my comments. So we're about to hit 10:45. And so I don't know if anyone else wants to continue the discussion. I don't know if we need to do that. Otherwise, I would say we're probably be set for tonight, and we can, give staff some time to respond based on what we brought up tonight, and present us with new information in a couple weeks, and we'll see where we're at. Unless other folks have other thoughts they'd like to express. Okay, not hearing that. So I guess staff, you've heard what we had to say. I think something can work here. We just got to get the details and dot the I's and cross the T's. And hopefully we can do that in the next couple of weeks. And,
sure, we're happy to take that direction, work with the applicant, and try to have more information for you at your scheduled action hearing in 2 weeks.
All right. Well, that sounds great. We're at 10:45, and as promised, let's stick to that. Thanks everybody for sticking it out for a long meeting, and we'll see everyone on May 5th. And with that, we'll call the April 21st meeting of the Planning Commission adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.